Chapter 228. Sang Yu's smile faded. It looks like Priest Qin Yu is prepared to refuse my good intentions. Qin Yu thought for a moment. I wonder if using you to establish my prestige is enough. Sang Yu's smile was bright. You'll know once you try. His pupils instantly dilated, causing both of his eyes to turn pure black. Qin Yu's eyes were blank. Sang Yu's voice drifted over. You are tired, very tired. Then lie down and rest well. He stepped forwards. Qin Yu's aura became increasingly weak before it was completely restrained. Go rest. Sang Yu looked up. A finger with long fingernails slowly pointed out. Suddenly, Qin Yu's lips curved up. He grabbed this finger and forcefully twisted it. Everyone could hear the clear sound of bones breaking. Gotcha! It was pleasing to the ears. Sang Yu cried out miserably. He stepped backwards, his eyes filled with hatred. He never thought that, even though he attacked with his full strength, he would fall into a trap. This damn brat. He had actually destroyed his finger. Sang Yu swore that he would make him pay a grievous price. But at this time, Sang Yu's body stiffened. It was like a rusty iron ingot had ruthlessly smashed into his head. Then a hand grabbed his neck. Fear rose up in Sang Yu's heart. He had immersed himself in the soul for his entire life. Even if he was caught off guard and attacked, as long as he was given several breaths of time, he would be able to break free. Unfortunately, the master of this hand didn't hesitate at all. He forcefully twisted. Gotcha! His neck twisted at an exaggerated angle. At the same time, the pitch-black 100 nether sword quietly pierced into the dantian, piercing through the nascent soul. Qin Yu reached out a hand. With a calm expression, he took away the storage shell. Then, he let go, allowing the tumbling seawater to wash away the corpse. At the edge of Moon Praying Shrine, countless sea folk saw this. Then, they couldn't help but gulp and groan inwardly. Sang Yu was a famous expert in the sea region. Yet, he was killed on the spot in such a short time. And what was most terrifying was that there were no ups and downs in the entire process. From start to finish in just a dozen breaths of time. Had Sang Yu underestimated him? Or was Qin Yu too strong? Perhaps it was both. In the shadows, many sea folk paled. Many of them had received a warning from Sea God Palace. At this moment, their backs were soaked in sweat and stuck to their bodies. However, these sea folk were in no mood to care. Their hearts were filled with rejoicing and lingering fear. Fortunately, they did not act rashly. Otherwise, the ones who would have died would have been them. This Qin Yu was truly terrifying. On the other side, the battle between Shuezheng and the two sea race powerhouses had already come to an end. The two sea race powerhouses retreated unwillingly after paying the price of being riddled with scars. Of course, Sang Yu's death was a powerful blow to their minds. Shuezheng gasped for breath. He looked up to reveal his pale face, but his eyes were as bright as ever. What left one with the deepest impression was the blazing, fighting spirit within them. It was as if no matter how difficult the situation was, nothing could make him lower his head and give up. He grinned. It looks like Priest Qin really didn't need me to do anything. But I still managed to send away those two people. So you must remember that you owe me a favor. If there is a chance in the future, you must return it to me. This was still no joke. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. He suddenly thought of Zheng Zhongxiu. This inexplicably close friend of his had once given birth to a connection with him in the future, and he even felt that he was extremely important to him. Thus, Qin Yu had helped him again and again, giving him a great stroke of good fortune, all for the sake of the future. Perhaps today's Shuezheng had the same thoughts as he did in the past. Thinking of this, Qin Yu smiled. Don't worry, my memory has always been good. Then, let us meet again in the future. He turned and strode forwards. Shuezheng's heart skipped a beat. At some point, he felt as if his hidden thoughts had been discovered. But he clearly hadn't said anything. So how could Qin Yu know? As he was thinking, he saw a large group of people rush out, accompanied by all sorts of voices. Hello everyone. Moon Worshipping Channel 2's News Gathering Department is currently broadcasting live. I am your host, Little C. Today, we will risk our lives to report the entire journey of Priest Qin Yu's departure. This is the most wonderful battle of the year. I ask that you do not miss it. Friends in the audience, saying you died just now. I don't have time to explain too much, so if you don't know Sang Yu's identity, please look it up yourself. If you didn't see the wonderful scene just now, then don't worry. Our moon-worshipping Channel 7 has added a replay function. As long as you spend a bit of spirit stones, you can watch the battle in high definition. I am Coolness from the audio department. Today, I will be chasing after Priest Chin Yu's elegance the entire time. I ask that you do not change channels. Cough, cough. Hurry, hurry, catch up. Don't panic, hurry, hurry. Shuizhong was stunned for a moment before he couldn't help but laugh. Indeed, the most courageous people in the world were these people. But this was also good. At the very least, he could find out whether or not Qin Yu could leave Moon Praying Shrine. Shuizhong ignored the frightened eyes of others. He dragged his wounded and blood-stained body to a giant billboard on the street. He lightly said, "Tell them to connect to the live broadcast." The wolf cavalry quickly left. Soon, the image on the billboard changed to one of rushing and swaying, as if there were two figures entangled in it. As the signal gradually stabilized, the image became clear. It really was a battle. Qin Yu's opponent was a thin and middle-aged sea folk. It was unknown what arcane technique he cultivated, or if he was born this way, but his skin, flesh, and bones were as hard as iron and stone. In a battle with Qin Yu, he wasn't at a disadvantage at all. Moreover, what was most terrifying was that this person's entire body was covered in poison. As soon as one touched it, it would invade the body through the skin. Shuizheng's eyes widened. It was poison eel. As the commander of the Wolf Riders, he had an extremely high status in Moon Praying Shrine. Shuizheng could easily identify the majority of famous powerhouses from all over. Poison eel was one of them. He came from an ordinary eel race, but for some unknown reason, his body had undergone a mutation, and he possessed an extremely terrifying poison. When he was born, he poisoned his parents to death. Without a doubt, this sort of mutated and harmful offspring would have been quickly executed. But, for some unknown reason, Poison Eel managed to survive. He lived in the eel tribe, where he was born for 20 years. Then, one day, he poisoned hundreds of his fellow tribesmen to death and vanished from sight. When he reappeared, it was over 100 years later. Poison Eel had reached nascent soul and killed everyone in his tribe. From that point on, Poison Eel's reputation gradually spread out, and as time passed, it became increasingly resounding. The crowd cried out in alarm from time to time. It was clear that Poison Eel was even more famous than Sang Yu, and more sea folk recognized him. This was another powerful character that had appeared today. As the video played, sound began to spread out. Although it was filtered and condensed by the array formation, it was still incomparably noisy, and only a vague outline could be heard. Qin Yu was speaking. "This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. You are indeed unqualified." Everything else was unclear, but these words were particularly clear. Then, the surrounding crowd fell silent. They recalled the words that Qin Yu had said to Sang Yu before he fought him. "I wonder if using you to establish my might is enough?" At this time, facing the powerful and terrifying Poison Eel, Qin Yu actually had such thoughts. "Priest Qin Yu, aren't you looking down on me too much? Be careful that you don't capsize." But soon, they realized that the reason Priest Qin Yu dared to be so arrogant was because he had confidence. In the video, Poison Eel grabbed Qin Yu's shoulder, his face fierce and smug. Across from him, Qin Yu grabbed his hand, black energy tumbling around his face. "You've been poisoned by me. Give up, you'll die." Impossible. This is impossible." Poison Eel twitched as he fell to the ground. Blood flowed out from every orifice of his head. His death was as miserable as it could be. Moreover, it was clear that he had died from poison. But the crux of the matter was that his entire body was covered in poison. How could he have been poisoned to death? Although the close-up shot that the cameraman had given them was a bit disgusting and frightening, many sea folks still found this scene hilarious. But there were many people who didn't think this was funny. Rather, a cold chill rose from the depths of their hearts. In a contest of souls, he had killed Sang Yu, and then in the blink of an eye, He had used poison to kill Poison Eel. Everyone couldn't help but think, was there anything Qin couldn't do? The Lord Priest sighed. He was even more certain of his own speculations. Qin absolutely had the remnant soul of an ancient powerhouse hidden within his body. This was the only reasonable explanation for everything that had happened. What a lucky boy, one that left others envious. TSK, Sang Yu and Poison Eel, those two fellows could be considered quite strong, but they had been killed on the spot in a short period of time. This should be enough to establish his prestige. Perhaps no one would dare to do anything to him again. The favors that Moon Praying Shrine had given out should have been reaped now. As the Lord Priest thought of this, he was secretly gratified. Poison Eel has been poisoned to death. Everyone, yes, this is the truth. It is happening right in front of our eyes. Heavens, this is too inconceivable. Poison Eel was once called the most poisonous creature in the sea region. Even the sea scorpion race that is famed for their poison cannot compare with him. But now, he has been poisoned to death. This is simply unimaginable. We have no idea what happened, but there is one thing we can be sure of. Priest Qin Yu's strength has refreshed everyone's understanding of him once more. He has absolutely hidden his depths. No, perhaps it should be said that no one has ever truly seen through him. Two powerhouses have already died beneath Priest Qin Yu's hands. I wonder if anyone else dares to make a move. We will do our best to continue the live broadcast for you. The hosts and the video channel were all incomparably excited. Their faces were flushed red with excitement. The audience watching this was even more astonished, and then they were extremely shocked. They thought, no wonder Priest Qin Yu dared to openly leave Moon Praying Shrine at this time. So he really did have the confidence to do so. Some people suddenly thought of how Qin Yu had intentionally targeted the whale monster race and forced the whale's sovereign to leave. Could it be that what he was doing now was to draw out the whale sovereign to attack? As this horrifying thought appeared in their hearts, they were immediately frightened. They tried to deny it, but the more they denied it, the clearer this thought became, as if it had taken root in their hearts. The sea folks' eyes widened. They stared at the screen. If this was really the case, then a heaven-shaking battle was about to begin. Chapter 229. At the peak of an underwater mountain, the whale's sovereign quietly stood there, his black armor filled with killing intent. Suddenly, his eyes flashed open and his lips curled up. This smile didn't destroy the cold aura around him. Rather, it rose to several levels, making one feel a chill rise from the depths of their hearts. Qin Yu, you want to kill me, but I also want to kill you. Let's see whether or not you can make it here today. The whale's sovereign looked up. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and a boundless aura broke out from his body, stirring up like an invisible hand. Deep in the sea, waves began to tumble. Boundless waves roared into the distance. In almost an instant, everyone for thousands of miles around could feel this terrifying aura that had suddenly appeared. Overbearing, oppressive, powerful, impossible to resist. Whale Sovereign, this was the Whale Sovereign. Shuizheng fiercely stood up. He looked towards the source of this aura, his expression dignified. He knew that Qin Yu wanted to kill the Whale Sovereign, and the other party was issuing an invitation to Qin Yu. But this invitation was clearly filled with malice. The Lord Priest's eyebrows shot up, a bit surprised by the Whale Sovereign's caution. It seemed that this fellow had also sent something, but he didn't know whether or not Qin Yu would accept it. Mr. Turtle had a dignified expression. He was well aware of what boundary the Whale Sovereign had reached. If he wanted to take advantage of the situation, Qin Yu would have no chance. Brat, you had best not let victory go to your head. Otherwise, not only will you fail to kill him, but you will also die today. Sang Yi gripped her fists, her face full of nervousness. She was well aware of just how much her big brother Qin Yu had prepared for today. But now, the Whale Sovereign had taken the initiative to issue an invitation, exposing his location. This was definitely a trap. Without time to think, Sang Yi took out a spirit shell from her chest. There was only a busy signal, and she couldn't connect. Her eyes immediately turned red. Big brother Chinyu, you mustn't be impulsive. Within Moon Praying Shrine, all of the live broadcast screens were shaking. One could hear the heavy breathing of the cameraman. It was clear he was carrying heavy equipment and was having a hard time running. But his efforts were finally rewarded. Amidst the cheers of joy, a figure appeared on the screen. It was Chinyu. Although it was blurry, all of the sea folk recognized him at first glance. It was clear that Chinyu had also discovered the reporter who had chased after them. He turned his head and glanced over, revealing a faint smile. Then, he turned and stepped forwards. His aura was the opposite of the whale sovereign's, and he exploded forwards. After a few flashes, he disappeared from the screen. But his choice was already very clear. Although the countless sea folk watching the live broadcast could understand this choice, they couldn't help but feel disappointment in their hearts. We're already halfway through taking off our pants, and you're just going to end it like this? The black-armored whale, Sovereign, frowned, a bit of helplessness in his eyes. He thought that Chinyu had painstakingly plotted this out, so his killing intent must be blazing. Who would have thought that he would leave so decisively? It was not a bluff, but a real decision to leave. If no one tried to stop him, he might really be able to escape. After all, the deaths of Sang Yu and Poison Eel had frightened the others. It seems like you don't have much confidence in yourself. What a pity. I have painstakingly planned this today. The whale sovereign took a step forwards. Countless shadows shot up into the skies from the rolling mountains below. If one looked carefully, they would discover that each shadow was a deceased whale monster soul. Their auras were cold and dreadful to the extreme. Surrounded by countless whale monster souls, the whale's sovereign howled as he flew away. He grasped a bead in his hand, and within it was a figure sitting cross-legged. This figure was Chinyu. A moment later, the camera equipment of a certain live broadcast platform captured a horrifying scene as it howled through the seawater. The black-armored whale Sovereign and the dreadful whale monster souls that surrounded him were like a raging tide of destruction, filled with monstrous killing intent. Standing in front of the camera, the host's shocked expression turned to one of pain. He fell to the ground, his body wildly tumbling about as he withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. In several breaths of time, all that was left of him was a skeleton that was twisted to pieces by the seawater. The camera equipment crashed to the ground. Although it was impossible to see what had happened, it was clear that the cameraman had suffered the same fate as the host. The camera equipment that fell to the ground still faithfully carried out its duty, clearly transmitting the image of the massive black shadows howling away into the distance. Countless sea folk paled and their bodies stiffened. They felt as if their blood would freeze over. What was this? Turtle Origin fiercely stood up. Whale Monster Soul Refinement. His complexion paled. He actually brought something like this out. Brat Chinyu, you better pray for your own good luck this time. The woman's complexion was dignified. Whale Monster Soul Refinement. Sang Yi quickly turned around. Seventh Ani, what is that? The woman said in a low voice, I never thought that the whale monster race would actually refine something like this. Aren't they afraid, miss? I fear that Priest Chin will be in danger this time. Sang Yi screamed. No, nothing will happen to Big Brother Chinyu. At this time, there was only one person that was still filled with confidence. The Lord Priest sighed again and again. There's no need to mention the whale's sovereign strength, and he is also extremely cautious. He even brought out the greatest treasure of the whale monster race. But what a pity he has to deal with Chinyu. I fear these whale monster souls can only be delivered to him as food. Wasn't this obvious? Chinyu had the remnant soul of an ancient powerhouse hidden within his body. The reason he was recklessly collecting soul beads was definitely to deal with him. Since he could swallow soul beads, there was no reason he couldn't swallow these whale monster souls. If he killed the whale sovereign as well, they would lose 2 of their trump cards. Perhaps the whale monster race, which had been strong for countless years, would never be able to rise again. Everyone knew that His Majesty in the capital city didn't like them for just a day or 2. The Lord Priest had an impulse to go over and take a look. But after hesitating again and again, he suppressed this thought. If he wasn't careful and was sucked in, his fate wouldn't be too beautiful. Just how old were they? It was best to be a bit less curious. The seawater was shaken apart by a formidable strength. Deep in the seabed, it formed a clear wave that spread into the distance. One could faintly make out a tall and straight figure. Suddenly, the wave stopped and spread outwards, forming a sweeping current that revealed Chinyu's figure. He turned around and looked behind him. A terrifying aura rapidly approached him, like an invisible mountain pressing down on him. Even breathing became difficult. Chinyu was expressionless. A cold light circulated in his eyes. He had caught up? Very good. Then, today, life and death will be decided. He turned around. Blood-red flames ignited around him, and he held away. That's right. Chinyu had left again. But he wasn't running away. Rather, he was luring the whale sovereign over. They had both made preparations for each other. If the whale sovereign chased after him, then Chinyu's arrangements would come in handy. Even with his current strength, he still didn't have absolute confidence he could win. So, as long as he could increase his chances of victory, even if it was only by a tiny bit, he couldn't miss it. Blood escape. Chinyu's speed reached the extreme. A moment later, he appeared above a rift valley on the seabed. He stopped and turned to wait. Soon, there was a loud rumbling sound as a massive shadow rapidly approached. Before it arrived, a cold aura covered the skies, making one feel as if they had fallen into an icy lake. The whale sovereign stopped. He calmly said, Chinyu, are you prepared to die? Chinyu lightly said, perhaps the one to die will be you. Oh, if you're so confident, it seems you've made many arrangements. The whale sovereign swept his eyes around. Then take it out. Let me see just what methods you have. Roar, roar. The whale monster refined souls roared out, their eyes filled with blood and slaughter. Chinyu's eyes turned cold. Good. As his voice fell, the aura of 20 nascent souls shot up into the skies from the seabed canyon. The whale sovereign narrowed his eyes. I knew that since you created so many nascent souls, how could you not have done something in secret? It seems they are your trump cards. 20 nascent souls, what a great deal. But what a pity they will all become blood food today. What a pity. He lifted a hand, and the whale monster refined souls surged up. They stubbornly stared at the 20 nascent souls, their slaughter intent soaring to the heavens. Now, I will give you one final chance. Submit to me, and you can live. Otherwise, you will be swallowed up by these refined souls, never to reincarnate. The 20 nascent souls paled. It was clear they were panic-stricken, but none of them wavered. The whale sovereign had no expression. Then, I will send you on your way first. His palm fell, and the whale monster refined souls howled out. Their bloodthirsty eyes were filled with excitement. The 20 nascent souls roared out. They lifted their hands and thrust forwards, their nascent soul cultivations completely erupting. But their target was not the refined souls, but the whale sovereign. Chains appeared out of thin air. They were deep blue and howled out. Monster refining chains. The whale sovereign frowned. This was a supernatural ability possessed by the sea monster royal bloodline, and now had appeared here. Could it be that the capital city was behind today's events? But even if the capital city interfered, with his current cultivation and the whale monster refined souls he had brought with him, exterminating Chinyu and these nascent soul sea folk shouldn't be difficult at all. Bang! A wild aura erupted. It was like an invisible sphere that protected the whale sovereign within. The monster refining chains wildly contracted around him, but they weren't able to touch him at all. Like this, the might of the monster refining chains was reduced by more than half. It could only temporarily trap the whale sovereign. But to Chinyu, this was more than enough. When he created these 20 nascent souls, he didn't have any intention of using their hands to kill others. When it came to his enemies, he had to personally kill them. Only then would he be happy. But right now, the most urgent matter was to eliminate these whale monster refined souls and cut off one of the whale sovereign's arms. He lifted a hand and grasped forwards. A wood attribute magic sword appeared, and he slashed out. Bang! The sword point shot out. Dazzling lightning erupted, turning into a thunder dragon that roared towards the whale monster, refined souls. This wood attribute magic sword was refined with sky thunder bamboo as its material. It had both wood and thunder attributes to begin with. With Qin Yu's current cultivation, the might of the power of thunder far surpassed what it had been in the past. The whale monster refined souls immediately cried out in pain. No matter what kind of departed soul it was, the power of thunder was its greatest nemesis. Even though the whale monster refined souls were incomparably formidable, they still weren't immune to it. But just by relying on the power of thunder, he could only wound them. He had no way of harming their foundations. The eyes of the enraged whale monster refined souls turned blood red. They stubbornly glared at Qin Yu and roared as they rushed forwards. A dense black mass tore through the layers of lightning, the chill terrifying the soul. Chapter 230. Qin Yu remained expressionless. A beam of black light shot out, breaking into the whale monster refined souls. Puff, puff. The sound of tearing filled the air. The crazily rushing whale monster refined souls emitted pain howls. Countless wounds crisscrossed across their bodies, and some sort of gelatinous black substance flowed out. As it touched the air, it rapidly thickened and fused together, turning the whale monster refined souls into a swamp. But it was clear that this wasn't able to stop the 100 Nether Sword. Its pitch-black sword blade was like the most agile fish in the deep sea. It avoided the vast majority of the thick rubber, and as for those that couldn't be dodged, it was instantly cut apart. Howling light flashed. In front of it, the whale monster refined souls were like fish on a chopping board, unable to resist at all. The whale's sovereign was enraged. He had seen this black short sword before, but he never imagined that it would possess such a terrifying might. Moreover, it seemed as if it could restrain the power of refined souls. It had to be known that these whale monster refined souls were refined using extreme methods, and they possessed a horrifying ability to pollute. Once a magic tool was contaminated by them, their spirituality would be eroded away and they would be scrapped. But this black short sword clearly didn't fear this. It cut through the whale monster refined soul as if it were chopping vegetables. "Get lost!" the whale's sovereign roared. The monster refining chains instantly tightened, emitting a sound that made one's scalp tingle, as if they would break in the next moment. The 20 nascent soul stage cultivators let out muffled groans. Their faces turned pale and blood flowed out from the corners of their mouths. With his strength alone, he had resisted 20 nascent souls as well as the power of the monster refining chains. The whale's sovereign was truly terrifying. But before today, the 20 nascent soul cultivators had received their orders. They all spat out a mouthful of blood essence, and within the azure demon refining chains, several dark red lines of blood appeared. They wriggled like meridians. The entire demon refining lock began to emit a faint blood-red light, and the void began to emit a corrosive sound. Facing the all-out attack of 20 nascent souls, the whale's sovereign's powerful attack was forcefully contained. Qin Yu glanced over, his expression cold and indifferent. He lightly said, "Begin." Within the soul space, Spirity sat down cross-legged. Her expression was solemn as she formed law formulas with her hands. Soul-snatching technique, activate. A strange suction force suddenly emitted from Qin Yu's body. The whale monster refined souls roared out in fear, struggling to escape. The 100 Nether Sword wildly attacked, tearing apart their bodies. The gelatinous substance that gushed out rapidly evaporated, turning into a gray aura that flew towards Qin Yu's head. Then, it was divided into two parts, black and white. The black was thick like ink, and the white was pure like snow. Qin Yu took a deep breath. The white fog scattered and entered his body through his nose and mouth. Then, starlight began to sprinkle down from his soul space, as if a heavy snowstorm was falling down. Half of the snowflakes rushed towards Qin Yu's soul and were directly absorbed, turning into a warm current. His soul was so happy that it nearly moaned. Roar, roar. The whale monster refined souls were even more terrified. But they discovered that there was no way for them to escape. They could only stiffly stay where they were, allowing their strength to be plundered. Thus, the roars became more frantic and fearful. The general idea was as follows. Whale sovereign, hurry and save us. Bastard, these people here are your elders. Hurry up and get over here. If we die, you won't have it easy either. Of course, this was only his imagination. But the whale sovereign's rage had already been thoroughly ignited. He roared out loud, and a monstrous light flashed. What appeared in front of him was a giant whale that was over 1,000 feet long. The monster refining chains instantly exploded, and 20 nascent souls were sent flying away. They wildly vomited blood. It was clear they had suffered heavy injuries. But the whale sovereign didn't come without paying a price. Countless faint marks appeared on the surface of his giant body. But what was terrifying was that the monster refining chains that were embedded within them had shattered. As the chains vanished, they began to wildly corrode his flesh and blood, causing the marks to rapidly expand and reveal the crimson flesh underneath. Thick flesh and blood flowed down from the wounds. The whale sovereign's eyes were icy cold, without the least bit of pain, as if these wounds weren't on his body at all. The giant whale fiercely swung its tail. Its massive body tore through the seawater, rolling forwards like a mountain. Chinyu lifted a hand. A finger appeared. Immediately, the depths of the seabed darkened, as if it had turned into a graveyard. Countless phantoms appeared beneath this gloomy aura, so dense that it was hard to count them all. Each one of them was a life form that had been buried in this sea region. From ancient times until now, there had only been such a terrifying number of them. All of a sudden, these phantoms turned into thick and thin streams of gray air that quickly flew into the finger. The finger immediately turned dark gray. Moreover, as more and more phantoms poured into it, the color deepened until it gradually transformed into darkness. It was like it had come from the netherworld, carrying with it endless slaughter. 3 blue fingers, the second finger, blue spirit. This finger was part of the boundless blue finger. It could summon heroic spirits that wouldn't scatter between the heavens and earth for their own use. After refining the soul mushroom and obtaining a partner soul, the strength of his soul had doubled. Only then did he have the qualifications to use this finger. The blue spirit finger instantly vanished. When it appeared again, it was already in front of the giant whale, pointing towards its head. Roar! The giant whale roared. Invisible sound waves shook outwards. The blue spirit finger violently shook and cracks appeared on its surface. But in the end, it broke through and pressed between the giant whale's eyebrows. Puff! A shallow black hole appeared. With the giant whale's 1,000-foot body, this couldn't even be considered a wound. But it emitted an incomparably pained roar, and its eyes instantly turned blood red. The blue spirit finger summoned undying heroic spirits to attack. What it targeted wasn't flesh and blood, but the soul. What the giant whale was withstanding now wasn't a wound between its eyebrows, but a similar wound on its soul. This finger had wounded its soul and shaken its foundation. Of course, Chinyu also paid a price. After the giant whale's sound waves impacted him, his eyes dimmed and his face paled. But he didn't take half a step back. He lifted a hand, and the black fog that had separated from the plundering whale monster refined souls condensed into a blade that instantly cut down. The giant whale struck out with a great wave that roared and swept outwards. But no matter how much strength it contained, it still couldn't stop the blade formed from the black fog. It was like a shadow that rose up from the waves. Shwa! The giant whale returned to its human form. It was the whale monster sovereign. A soul attack. It was actually a soul attack. That finger from before could barely be considered as a soul attack. But this blade was a true soul attack technique. The road of soul slaughter could only be grasped by someone with a nascent soul cultivation and above. Even if he had only touched upon it, how could Chinyu use it? But thinking about this was useless. A supernatural soul slaughter ability could only be resisted with the strength of the soul. Otherwise, no matter how transcendent one's magic power or cultivation was, they still wouldn't be able to resist it at all. The whale monster sovereign clenched his teeth. He lifted a hand and slapped between his eyebrows. Above his head, the phantom of a 10-foot-long whale appeared. There was a bloody hole between his eyebrows. This was his soul. Chinyu, the whale monster sovereign roared. His soul beckoned, and the whale monster refined souls flew over uncontrollably, blocking in front of him. Puff! The black fog blade instantly cut through. The first whale monster refined soul was smashed to pieces. Then there was a second, a third, until there were 10. Only after 10 whale monster refined souls did the blade stop. After they died, the fog they left behind began to crazily gather towards Chinyu. The black fog continued to separate and condense once more. The whale monster sovereign roared and rushed forwards. It was impossible for him to give Chinyu another chance to send out a soul attack. His cultivation erupted to the limit, and killing intent surged in his eyes. But beneath this brutal killing intent, there was also a trace of fear. When he had chased Chinyu out of the capital city, he had withstood a terrifying beam of light that fell from the heavens. No matter how Chinyu obtained the favor of the sea spirit, this was his trump card. The whale monster sovereign had already finished his preparations to resist the strength of the sea spirit. He was just waiting for Chinyu to attack. But in the end, what he waited for wasn't a beam of light that fell from the heavens. Rather, Chinyu flicked his sleeves and took out 600 swamp alligator teeth, refining them into a complete set of magic tools. This was the strongest strength that Chinyu had grasped. From the day he refined it, he had a vague idea, and now it had finally become clear. He would use it to sound the final death knell of the whale monster sovereign. Bang! The 600-plus magic tools shot out at nearly the same time. Block it for me. The whale monster sovereign roared. The black armor covering his body began to shine with countless runes. Boundless black light erupted, condensing into an illusory armor that wrapped around him. This was a method that the whale monster sovereign had prepared in order to resist the strength of the sea spirit. But now he couldn't care about this. There were over 600 magic tools in this set, and their might reached an inconceivable level. If he didn't draw support from the black armor, he might die here. Die. This was the first time that this thought had appeared in the whale monster sovereign's mind. Before this, no matter what happened, he had absolute confidence that he could kill Chinyu and have a last laugh. But just as this thought appeared, it was ruthlessly crushed to pieces. The whale monster sovereign's eyes were filled with madness and cruelty. He didn't believe that with his terrifying cultivation that had nearly touched upon divine soul, he would be killed by such a little insect. Rumble, rumble. A heaven-shaking and earth-shattering sound rang out like rolling thunder in the deep sea. The seawater was shaken up, tumbling about, and forming terrifying waves that rushed into the distance. Then, the scope of the shockwave expanded outwards at an astonishing speed. In the rapidly speeding undersea shuttle, several sea folk carrying camera equipment widened their eyes in panic. Then, they were sent flying away by the rushing seawater. The sturdy body of the shuttle twisted and bent in the terrifying seawater. The members of the oceanic race who were hiding in it all let out muffled groans and fainted. Thus, in Moon-Praying Shrine, nearly all live broadcasts were cut off. Staring at the white snowflakes on the screen, countless sea folk widened their eyes, incomparably shocked. This was because before the images were cut off, they could hear the pained groans of the shuttle as it twisted and deformed. It had to be known that this sort of undersea shuttle was something that only battalions had the qualifications to equip. Even if it was an old product that had been eliminated, it was only a bit slower, but its defensive capabilities were still incomparably powerful. In the rumors, even a nascent soul would find it difficult to break through a shuttle in a short period of time. But now, just the shock waves caused by the massive waves were able to instantly deform the entire shuttle. If so, then when the two of them truly collided, Just what degree would their might reach? Just thinking about it left one's scalp tingling and their thoughts in knots. Big brother Chinyu. Sang Ye clenched her fists, her face filled with nervousness. Turtle Origin's eyes widened. Even he never imagined that Chinyu would possess such formidable strength. Within Sea God Palace, the Lord Priest clapped his hands, his face filled with excitement. The ancient remnant's soul has attacked. That's right, he has attacked. Chapter 231. This was a refining method of the demonic path, one that believed that quantitative change would eventually lead to qualitative change. This was a treasure refined from over 600 swamp alligator teeth. Its might truly surpassed one's imagination. For several miles, all of the seawater exploded, turning into endless white powder. Of course, this was only a description from the surface, but it was enough to shake one's soul. The boiling seawater displayed an incomparably terrifying destructive power. Anything that fell into it, even an entire mountain, would be torn to pieces. This was already proven by the collapsing rift at the bottom of the sea. With a loud, rumbling sound, everything collapsed, turning the deep valley into flat land. After a long time, the white powder that the seawater had turned into finally began to recede, revealing the distressed figure of the whale sovereign. His face was pale, and his black armor hung in tatters on his body. Countless wounds crisscrossed his body, and blood dripped down from the broken armor before being swept away by the seawater. There was a gash on his face, starting from the tip of his left eyebrow and slanting down to the corner of his mouth, all the way to his lower jaw. His flesh and blood were overturned, and white bone could be faintly seen. He no longer had the arrogant and disdainful aura he had before. Chinyu's eyes were ice cold, without the least bit of warmth. The sea map above his head slowly unfurled. Countless islands were scattered all over, all of them shining like precious treasures. He lifted a hand and pointed a finger into the sea map. Where his finger fell, there was a black dot. In the next moment, a dazzling beam of light fell from the skies, tearing apart the endless seawater and submerging the whale sovereign. It was so fast that when Chinyu's finger fell, the beam of light arrived in the space of a single breath of time. His finger fell, and the light came, but as fast as it came, it also left. As the islands on the sea map dimmed, the beam of light disappeared, and the beam of light vanished with it. In the deep sea, a straight channel appeared, stretching from the seabed to the surface. It paused for a moment before seawater surged up, submerging this channel. Cough, cough, cough. The whale sovereign violently coughed. Yes, he hadn't died, but his appearance was extremely miserable. Most of his scalp had been torn off, and his chest had been torn open. One could even see his struggling heart. He looked up at Chinyu. He lifted a trembling hand, and a light cracking sound came from his palm. Chinyu stiffened. The whale's sovereign chuckled. I never imagined that I would be forced into such a distressed situation by you. I was even nearly killed by you. But in the end, the one who is laughable is still me. He opened his hand, revealing a broken bead in his palm. The figure within had also broken apart along with the bead, but one could still see that it was Chinyu's appearance. His broken face was twisted in pain. I could have explained to you what this bead is, but you're too strange. I don't want you to turn the tables on me at the last moment, so I won't say much. Then let's end this. The whale sovereign walked over. His head had turned into the head of a fierce whale. It seemed rather strange on a human's body. He opened his mouth to reveal a mouthful of sharp teeth. Puff! The whale sovereign stiffened. He blinked his eyes, confusion filling his face. The pure white sword in Chinyu's hand pierced through the jaws that were covered with fangs. The tip of the sword pierced through the top of the head, revealing a small section. Blood flowed down the snow-white blade, dyeing his palm red. I don't know what this bead is, but it's clear that it's useless against me. Chinyu's eyes flashed with a cold light. Whale sovereign, let us never meet again. He exerted strength in his palm, and the sword spun. Blood wildly gushed out like a waterfall, drenching Chinyu's hair, dyeing his face red, and soaking his black robes. Roar! With an angry roar, the phantom of a giant whale appeared. It looked at Qin Yu with incomparable hatred in its eyes. Then, in the next moment, it blew itself up without hesitation. The whale's sovereign had already touched upon the divine soul realm. Even if he hadn't made a breakthrough, his soul had already begun to transform. Thus, after his mortal body died, his soul could launch a final attack. Within his soul space, Qin Yu's soul suddenly opened its eyes. In the next moment, countless tiny cracks appeared on its surface, tightly weaving together. Spirity stuffily coughed. The point between her eyebrows split open and a dark red mark appeared, glistening with moisture. On the surface, it seemed that her injuries were much lighter than Qin Yu's soul. But the truth was that Spirity stuffily coughed and fainted. The partner soul took its host as its master. When it resisted external attacks, the vast majority of the damage would be borne by it. Otherwise, if the whale sovereign's soul blew up, it would be enough to drag Qin Yu down with it. In the outside world, Qin Yu's complexion paled and his eyes darkened. Traces of blood began to flow out from his head, and his body began to totter. At this time, a sudden change occurred. The blood that stained Qin Yu's sword hand suddenly faded, as if it were being absorbed. Following that, all the blood from the whale sovereign's corpse wildly gushed out, flowing down the sword blade and vanishing into his palm. A warm current rapidly spread through his body. This feeling of his mortal body cheering in comfort and his soul groaning in pain mixed together was truly indescribable. Qin Yu stood where he was, not willing to move at all. Time slowly passed. As the terrifying shock waves dissipated, although the seawater at the seabed was still tumbling, it had lost its all-destroying strength. All of the sea folk watching this battle widened their eyes. Was it over? Who was the final victor? Originally, this wasn't something too difficult to imagine. Just how powerful was the whale sovereign? It was only natural for him to win. But with that terrifying momentum just now and the absolute strength that Qin Yu had revealed, no one dared to lightly judge him. In particular, those sea folk masters that had received a warning from Sea God Palace to hold back. At this time, as they rejoiced, they felt even more gratitude towards the Lord Priest. Luckily, they hadn't done anything, otherwise they feared they would have died dozens of times over. Who could have imagined that Qin Yu, who originally only had a golden core cultivation, would become so freakishly strong in just a few years? But even though they were shocked, after a brief moment of hesitation, some people began to approach the area where the battle had erupted. Of course, they were careful as they prepared to flee at any moment. But every sea folk that approached held a bit of hope in their hearts. Perhaps the battle between the whale's sovereign and Qin Yu would result in both sides suffering. Didn't that mean that they would have a chance to profit from the fight? Soon, the first sea folk to pass through the heavy waves and arrive at the center of the battle appeared. This was a thin, black-clothed man. His face was covered with a veil, revealing only a pair of slender eyes that shined with a sharp light. He was first shocked by the horrifying scene at the seabed, but soon his eyes fell onto Qin Yu and the whale sovereign. At first glance, the black-clothed man's mind shook. The whale's sovereign had died. He had actually been killed. However, Qin Yu's condition didn't seem too great. He stood there stiffly, his aura nearly undetectable. Could it be that he had also died? Wild joy rose in the depths of the black-clothed man's heart. He licked his lips, endless greed erupting in his eyes. After a brief hesitation, the black-clothed man rushed out. Many people were hurrying over. He couldn't delay, otherwise this great lucky chance in front of him might fly away. Wealth came from danger. Taking risks wasn't anything at all, much less at this time, when Qin Yu seemed to be in a perilous situation. If the heavens wanted him, if he didn't take it, he would suffer. He lifted a hand. Dark light circulated in his palm. The black-clothed man lifted his hand, about to strike Qin Yu's back. Even though it seemed that Qin Yu wasn't a threat at all, it was better to be cautious. If someone could kill the whale sovereign, one didn't need to be an idiot to know that they were a ruthless character. Perhaps they still had a single breath of life left. If he wasn't careful, he might fall into a trap. But just as he was about to attack, his body stiffened. Then his chest exploded and a red sword pierced through his back. The sword blade blazed with flames, igniting the black-clothed man's corpse. It began to burn in the deep sea like a raging torch. Deep sea flames. No matter how one looked at this scene, there was a deep strangeness to it. Thus, the second sea folk master's eyes widened, and he hesitated. The whale's sovereign was thoroughly dead. His head had been pierced through, and most importantly, there wasn't a single breath coming from him. It was clear he couldn't be deader than dead. The one that was burning was nearly cooked, and he was also thoroughly dead. There was only Chinyu left. Although he didn't seem to be much of a threat, the one that was burning was clearly his handiwork. He was truly fierce. To kill the whale sovereign was already terrifying enough, but he still had the strength to kill others. If one didn't see this with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it. The sea folk master's eyes turned. He flicked his sleeves, and the temperature of the seawater rapidly dropped. In the blink of an eye, a black ice arrow condensed. Schwa, without a sound, the black ice arrow tore through the seawater and shot towards the back of Chinyu's head. Everything went smoothly. In just a blink of an eye, he would be able to witness the splendid scene of a head exploding into flowers. The sea folk master's heart suddenly shrank. Pa! The black ice arrow shattered, and a black shadow howled towards him. He wanted to dodge, but his body froze. Puff! Blood gushed out, and a head shot into the skies. Then, the blood that gushed out from the neck froze over. The speed was so fast that it actually caught up to the head that flew out. Then, the following scene appeared. The headless corpse wildly spat out blood. After it froze over, it resembled red fireworks. The head hung above, its face filled with panic and fear. The ice spread, covering the entire body. Not too far away from the burning sea folk, another ice sculpture appeared. That's right, Chinyu had indeed been injured. In particular, when the whale sovereign's soul exploded in the end, if it weren't for Spirity blocking the majority of the impact, he would have already died. Even so, with his formidable soul cultivation, when he used Spirit Stab in conjunction with the 5-element swords, his attacks were still inconceivably sharp. This was why he was able to kill 2 people without even moving his body. More members of the sea race finally arrived. Burning corpses, frozen corpses, these 2 completely different strengths caused one's mind to race. In particular, the scene of the whale sovereign's jaw being pierced through caused a cold chill to crawl up from the hearts of all the sea folk. Chinyu had won. He was actually terrifying to the extreme. It was already unimaginable that he could kill the whale sovereign, but even though he was severely wounded, he could still kill 2 more. It was hard to recognize the one who was burning, but it was clear that the one who was frozen was a master of the South Mountain tribe. As everyone was hesitating, Chinyu moved. He slowly drew out his sword. The whale sovereign's corpse seemed as if it had been dried out for countless years. It quietly disintegrated into powder that was swept away by the seawater, vanishing without a trace. Chinyu turned around. His movements were slow and stiff, as if his mind and body weren't in harmony. This scene caused the eyes of many sea folk to brighten. Chapter 232. He's injured. It was unknown who spoke first. Although his voice wasn't loud, it spread through the seawater and entered the ears of all the sea folk. Chinyu sighed. His eyebrows furrowed together, as if he were helpless. Human Chinyu has killed the cornerstone of my sea races, the whale sovereign. We cannot let him leave. That's right, we must keep him here, otherwise where will the prestige of my sea races go? Everyone attack together. Let's see if he really has 3 heads and 6 arms. The crowd roared, their emotions roused. Chinyu turned his head and looked at the sea race expert in the crowd. His face was flushed red, and the wound between his eyebrows was swollen with blood. Whoosh! There was the sound of breaking air. In the next moment, blood splashed into the air. The sea race master who had been making the most noise fell backwards. His chest and abdomen had been torn apart. A terrifying strength instantly extinguished all life. There was a deathly silence. Qin Yu's eyes darkened. He coughed several times. That's right. I am indeed severely wounded. But believe me before I die, I will always have a way to drag some people to the grave with me. He pointed a finger. You, or you. Of course, it could be anyone else. Any one of you could. Will you let me leave peacefully, or will you gamble that you won't die? Make your choice. The Sea Race Masters' complexions were uncertain. They certainly weren't willing to let Qin Yu leave, but if they really wanted him to stay, there was a great difference between seeing someone die with their own eyes and seeing it later. Qin Yu had already proven that he still had the strength to easily kill others. Hand over the whale's sovereign storage magic tool, and I can let you leave. Whoosh! This Sea Race powerhouse, who clearly had some prestige, had his head separated from his body before he could finish speaking. Blood spurted out with pu-pu sounds. Qin Yu struggled to say, I'm sorry, but I won't leave anything behind. Does anyone have any objections? In the current situation, he couldn't show the least bit of weakness. Otherwise, these sea folk would take an inch and take a yard. Finally, they would turn into greedy wolves that would gnaw at him until not even his bones remained. The complexions of the Sea Race Masters changed. There was anger in their eyes, but there was also a bit of dread. If Qin Yu dared to recklessly kill people, it was clear he still had strength to spare. If he truly went all out, many people would die, and they might even be among them. If things continue to develop like this, then perhaps Qin Yu really might be able to shake off all the Sea Race Masters and escape from their encirclement. But there were always accidents. There were also some sea folk that weren't afraid of death. For instance, the Whale Monster Race Masters. Although the Lord Patriarch had declared that he had nothing to do with the Whale Monster Race, and even strictly ordered them not to meddle in this matter, the Whale Monster Race couldn't just stand idly by. After an urgent discussion, the Whale Monster Race sent out a formidable team of 5 nascent soul powerhouses. They concealed their tracks and secretly hurried to Moon Praying Shrine. They were well aware that with the Lord Patriarch's temperament, once he was forced to this step, he would absolutely not allow Qin Yu to leave alive. The facts proved that they understood the Whale Sovereign and their judgment was correct. But the result was completely different from what they had imagined. The Lord Patriarch had died. Not only that, but also how the whale monster races and had was. The whale, the greatest, the Uz's. After confirming this result, all of the whale monster clansmen paled. They were well aware that the decline of their tribe was inevitable. But this decline was also divided into levels. If they could kill Qin Yu here and avenge the whale sovereign, then with this momentum, perhaps the whale monster race would have a chance to struggle at death's door and rise again in the future. Otherwise, if they allowed Qin Yu to swagger away, he would lose all of his essence, energy, and soul. Everyone would kick a man when he was down, and the whale monster race would be beyond redemption. Thus, the whale monster clansmen attacked. Their eyes were filled with madness and determination. Even if they all died here, they would drag Qin Yu down with them. Qin Yu, with a hateful roar, the first whale monster master rushed out. He returned to his original form and slapped the seawater, causing massive waves to rise up, his aura billowing outwards. Puff! Its flesh was torn apart, and blood gushed out. A deep cut appeared between the whale's eyes. Flesh and bone were separated, and blood flowed out, mixed with a muddy white paste. Kill him. Avenge the Patriarch. But this didn't frighten those behind. More whale monsters rushed out, all of them returning to their original forms. There were at least several dozen of them. The surrounding seafolk masters were overjoyed. Even if Qin Yu still had strength left over, these whale monsters would be more than enough to consume what little strength he had left. At that time, they would naturally have a chance. This was simply too wonderful. They praised the whale monster race, praised their noble spirit of sacrificing themselves for others. Qin Yu bitterly smiled. Right now, he had the strength to kill 4 or 5 more people. If these whale monsters all rushed at him, there really wasn't much he could do. However, waiting for death wasn't something he could do. Even if he couldn't escape, he still had to go all out and kill a few more people. For instance, his right index finger. In these past years, the little blue lamp had injected countless poisons into it. Chinyu hadn't been willing to use it, and if he really did die, he would explode it. That would definitely cause many people to bleed from every orifice and die miserable deaths. Stop! With a cold shout, an old turtle appeared. Its thin body stood straight, and its wretched face was filled with dignity and dignity. Turtle Origin flicked his sleeves. Giant waves rose up from the seabed, blocking the whale monsters and forcing them back. Turtle Origin, what are you doing? An old whale spoke in the human language. If you stop us from taking revenge for our patriarch, we won't rest until we die. Today, no one can stop us. Not only was the whale monster race enraged, but the various seafolk powerhouses that were singing praises in their hearts were also thoroughly enraged. What do you mean? What do you mean? We just saw a glimmer of hope, and you want to destroy it? Even if you are Turtle Origin, this is too much. Turtle Origin, it's best if you don't interfere in today's matters. This was someone who maintained his status, his tone dignified. Doubt friend Turtle, as a human, there is no need to provoke so much trouble. This was someone who pretended to be calm and spoke up to advise him. Senior Turtle, you're the cornerstone of the sea region. Are you really going to allow this human to act as he pleases in front of my sea race? This was a sanctimonious and righteous display of pressure. Turtle Origin had no expression. Chinyu is someone that His Majesty wants. If anyone touches him, that is the same as becoming enemies with the capital city. The old whale flew into a rage. Turtle Origin, even if His Majesty comes here today, he won't be able to save this man. Children, follow me and kill him to avenge the patriarch. Bang! The seawater violently exploded. With loud rumbling sounds, it rushed into the distance. A mountain-sized turtle appeared deep in the seabed. It opened its mouth and ruthlessly swallowed. The old whale screamed miserably as it was wrapped up in seawater and pulled into the turtle's mouth. Creak! Creak! Blood gushed out from between its teeth and lips, dyeing the seawater red. The whale monster clansmen were stunned, and so were the various sea race powerhouses. No one imagined that Turtle Origin's reaction would be so cruel and bloodthirsty. He had directly eaten up the strongest of the whale monster clansmen, the old whale monster. Gulp! The large turtle raised its neck, the sound of swallowing becoming incomparably clear. Its icy cold eyes swept around. Defying His Majesty's will is the same as plotting treason. I have the qualifications to punish you on behalf of His Majesty. I am old and have been a vegetarian for many years. But occasionally eating a few bites of meat to supplement my nutrition might not be bad. This was a naked death threat, and the key point was that this old turtle had the qualifications to threaten them. Even such an amazing existence like the old whale had been swallowed up in a single bite. If it were them, they feared they would die even faster. Moreover, looking at Turtle Origin's actions, it seemed he was determined to capture Chinyu. If he tried to stop him, then if he really angered His Majesty in the capital city and was charged with the crime of deceiving the ruler, there would be no end to future troubles. The old turtle turned its head and coldly said, Chinyu, come with me. Chinyu cupped his hands together. If so, then I'll have to offend you. He stepped onto the turtle's back. The large turtle turned and swung its limbs. The seawater surged and lifted him away. A moment later, after determining that no one was chasing after him, Chinyu was sent flying away. The large turtle vanished and turned back into human form. Turtle Origin looked Chinyu up and down. Fellow Taoist Chinyu's methods are truly amazing. You even managed to kill off the whale sovereign. I admire you. Chinyu bitterly smiled. I was just lucky. I don't deserve Senior's praise. Don't call me Senior, it grates on my ears. Compared to the whale sovereign, I am a bit weaker. If you can kill him, then there is no need to mention me. These words were mocking and taunting, but they were also earnest. Strength represented status. Right now, Chinyu already had the qualifications to stand on equal footing with him. Chinyu bitterly smiled. All right, enough nonsense. Let's hurry. Turtle Origin flicked his sleeves and wrapped him up. Then, they howled forwards. Soon, A large ship appeared in front of them. The members of the capital city's war division were waiting for them. As they saw Turtle Origin arrive, they all bowed. As their eyes fell on Chinyu, they were filled with shock and awe. Killing the whale, Sovereign, just this alone was enough to obtain their respect. Set sail immediately. If someone catches up to us again, things will become troublesome. The old turtle waved his hand. It was clear he wasn't as confident as he seemed. The ship soon set sail, heading straight for the capital city. Before Chinyu could ask anything, he was sent to a cabin to recuperate. His soul injuries were severe, so he went into seclusion. He swallowed and refined the star pills in his storage ring to repair the damage to his soul. Unfortunately, even the top-grade pills that had been purified by the little blue lamp didn't have much effect on Chinyu's soul injuries. They could only barely suppress the pain, but the surface of his soul was still covered in cracks. If he were to withstand another impact, he feared his soul would shatter. After the ship sailed for several days, Chinyu opened his eyes. He let out a deep breath, a helpless look on his face. It seemed that if he wanted to repair his soul, he would need to draw support from a formidable external force. His eyes flashed and his thoughts raced. If the Sea Sovereign didn't hesitate to offend all sides and order the old turtle to forcefully take him away, then there must be a need. Without a doubt, the greatest possibility was that it was related to him crazily helping the sea folk cross tribulation these past days. Could it be that the Sea Sovereign was crossing tribulation? If this was true, then Chinyu might be able to take advantage of this opportunity to put forward some appropriate requests. For instance, repairing his soul injuries. After all, his soul was damaged, so there might be dangers when he crossed tribulation. Of course, taking a step back, even if it wasn't the whale Sovereign crossing tribulation, he would still have a chance to put forward his own requests. Now, all he had to do was patiently wait. Chapter 233. There was a small interlude along the way. There was a knock on Chinyu's cabin door, and the person standing outside was unexpected. Princess Lushy, it's been a long time. After a brief pause, Chinyu smiled and spoke, his voice light and gentle. The princess had an indifferent expression. There is no need to enter. I will only ask you one thing. When father bestowed a marriage upon you, why did you refuse? Chinyu cupped his hands together. My heart already belongs to someone else. I cannot destroy the princess' happiness just to live. Princess Lushy was stunned. She immediately frowned. Is what you say true? I can make a vow. Her eyes softened a little. Princess Lushy turned and left, sighing inwardly. The facts proved that her eyesight was excellent and the person she chose was outstanding. He was countless times more outstanding than anyone else her age. But why did they have to meet so late? Or perhaps it was better if they didn't know each other at all. The princess pursed her lips and vanished around corner. The ship sailed through the deep sea, the waves tumbling about. The ship docked at the dock. Chinyu stepped onto the deck and looked at the magnificent and miraculous undersea city in front of him, his expression calm. After disembarking the ship, Turtle Origin left. A group of people from the capital city escorted Chinyu onto a carriage and into the royal palace through a side door. What happened next surpassed Chinyu's expectations. He didn't need to look for an opportunity to request for Soup Man to personally deliver many soul-healing treasures. Chinyu, rest well. If there is anything you need, feel free to ask. Although he hadn't interacted much with Soup Man, Chinyu knew a little about his greedy nature. He was surprised. It seemed that His Majesty in the palace had a request for him, and it was quite important. After thinking for a moment, Chinyu suppressed these thoughts. It was fine as long as he focused on recovering from his injuries. When the time came, he would naturally know what was going on. What Soup Man delivered were indeed extremely precious treasures of the sea region. Chinyu borrowed the little blue lamp's power to hasten their growth, making them even more potent. Time quietly passed. Although the strength of these treasures was absorbed by his soul, the cracks on its surface didn't disappear. In the hall, Chinyu opened his eyes. A bit of gloominess flashed in them before he bitterly smiled. Indeed, it was useless. The soul was the most mysterious existence in a cultivator's body. One needed to touch the divine soul realm, or, like Qin Yu, possess a heaven-defying good fortune in order to do so. It was incomparably powerful, possessing all types of mysteries. However, once it was damaged, repairing it was unimaginably difficult. Moreover, what worried Qin Yu the most was that Spirity had been in a deep slumber ever since that day. Through their connection, Qin Yu could sense that her aura was constantly weakening. If this continued, Qin Yu was worried that Spirity would never wake up. Just how could he repair his soul and awaken Littleling? As Qin Yu was distressed, His Majesty had finally made appropriate arrangements in the Grand Hall. He had already secretly cleaned up the many uncertain factors. Even if he failed to cross tribulation, the capital city's authority would be able to pass smoothly without widespread chaos. Call Qin Yu to see this solitude. Not long after this man with the greatest influence in the world, whose cultivation and status stood at the peak, spoke, Qin Yu was brought to the grand hall at the center of the royal palace. Raising his head to look at the towering aura, he immediately knew who he was going to meet next. Straightening his black robes, he pushed open the doors and strode in. The first thing he saw was the figure sitting on the dragon throne. He sat there quietly, and there was no powerful aura around him. Yet, he seemed to be the center of the world, causing people to feel reverence. Qin Yu greets Your Majesty. The Sea Sovereign opened his eyes, his expression calm. He was a dignified man. From the very start, he had never described his appearance. This was because, with his status, there was no need to mention such things. Qin Yu, do you know that this solitude has been sitting on this throne for over 300 years without leaving? Qin Yu's heart shook and his eyes turned dignified. As the ruler of the sea race, I wield the highest authority in the world, and I control the lives and deaths of trillions of lives. It might seem like I have endless glory, but who knows of the hardships within? You've already seen the underground vine. It's my companion vine. If I hadn't transferred my power to it, I wouldn't have been able to live until today. But the feeling of having one's own cultivation base extracted is really not good. I believe that my will is tough, but I don't want to endure it any longer. Therefore, I hope that you can help me obtain freedom. The whale's sovereign had an indifferent expression. He lowered his head and finally revealed the arrogance of a transcendent king. This solitude must cross tribulation, break through the cage of my body, and obtain a new life. Qin Yu, are you willing to help this solitude? Of course, this wasn't really a question. If you don't believe me, why don't you try rejecting me? Qin Yu bowed. I will do everything I can. He paused for a moment and continued to say, but I will need to make some preparations for this. After all, if there is an accident, I cannot afford the consequences. Good. This solitude will give you 3 days. Your Majesty, I still have something to say. He looked up. It isn't that I have petty thoughts, but the truth is that the world is full of dangers. I have no choice but to consider things as soon as possible. I hope that Your Majesty can give me a promise and allow me to leave once I smoothly cross tribulation. The Sea Sovereign nodded. Very well, this solitude agrees. But you must also agree to a condition. After you leave the sea region, you must never take another step into it for the rest of your life. Qin Yu bowed. As Your Majesty wishes. By controlling the method to cross tribulation, he could create a massive number of nascent souls. If he were to be used by someone, he would have the qualifications to stir up storms in the sea region at any time. At that time, his rule over the capital city would likely be greatly threatened. After reaching an agreement, Qin Yu respectfully bowed and left the Grand Hall. On the way to the capital city, he had already guessed that the Sea Sovereign might be crossing tribulation. He had communicated with the little blue lamp before. Although he didn't obtain a response, Qin Yu knew that the little blue lamp must have received his inquiry. Since it didn't refuse, it was clear that dealing with heavenly tribulation wouldn't be a problem. However, there was still a difficult problem. If he helped the Sea Sovereign cross tribulation, he couldn't do it like he did at Moon Praying Shrine. He couldn't let them fall into a deep sleep and use the medicinal efficacy to stimulate their cultivation and draw down heavenly tribulation. Then, what could he do so that he wouldn't expose the existence of the little blue lamp? This was the reason why Yu said he needed to make some preparations. After returning to his dwelling, Yu's thoughts stirred. The array formation in the grand hall revolved, isolating this place from the outside world. Light flashed in his hand, and the little blue lamp appeared. He looked at it for several breaths of time and said, "I want to help the sea's sovereign cross tribulation. This should be beneficial to you, but your existence cannot be exposed. So, I want to know, what method do you have to resolve this?" The little blue lamp had its own will. This was already proven. The little blue lamp gently trembled. The coral in the hall was still crimson red, indicating that it was daytime. But faint traces of deep blue surged on its surface. Then, like a bubble, it suddenly burst open and vanished from sight. Yu was startled. He closed his eyes, and a thumb-sized lantern appeared in his soul space. A blue light shot out, falling between Yu's eyebrows and turning into a faint mark. It was blurry and constantly changing, making it impossible to see what it was. After a long time, he opened his eyes. His complexion was a bit complex. He sighed and finally revealed a smile. So it was only today that he had obtained the approval of the little blue lamp and become its true master. Perhaps this test had already begun when he inadvertently obtained the little blue lamp at the Eastern Mountain sect. It really wasn't easy at all. In the past, Yu had tried to subdue the little blue lamp with just a few drops of blood. He had been far too naive. But no matter what, this was a wonderful thing, wasn't it? He thought that the next 3 days would pass in peace and quiet. But before long, a guest arrived at Yu's palace. "Greetings, Lord Yu." The one who spoke was a member of the capital city's war division. Yu had seen him before on the great ship that had come to the capital city. Yu frowned. "What do you want?" The war division member respectfully said, "This subordinate has received orders to give a box to you. Time is limited, and I cannot stay for long. There is something in the box that can help you dispel your doubts." The war division member bowed once more and left. The box wasn't large. It was about twice the size of an adult's palm. The surface of the wood was covered in a thick layer of paste. It was clear that it was often played with by people and was an ancient object. Yu sensed it and didn't find anything wrong. Then he flicked his sleeves and opened it. There were no traps, poison gas, or anything like that. It seemed he had been too cautious. Inside the wooden box was a long object wrapped in gray leather. Beside it was a jade slip. From its appearance, it didn't seem to be an object of the sea races. Rather, it had a bit of human style to it. Yu reached out and took the jade slip. A halo of light flashed on its surface before it shattered into motes of light that rapidly condensed into a screen in front of him. A group of figures appeared in front of him. It seemed that somewhere, within an ancient and magnificent building, there was a hint of decay in its mottled appearance. But there was even more of a hidden background. "Lord Yu, when you see this, it is clear that you have already received the gift we have passed on to you. This key is related to the secrets of the world. We have always believed that it is the key to helping the sea spirit awaken. You are the sea spirit's world walker. We have given you this key in hopes that you will be able to obtain some harvests." At the end of the screen, everyone lowered their heads, respectfully and sincerely bowing. The screen shattered. Yu frowned. He recognized the person who spoke. He was one of the 4 priests that had managed the sea spirit baptism. But today, the 3 people beside him seemed a bit older. Looking at their clothes, these sea folk that appeared on the screen should be priests of the capital city. But the key question was, why did they say that he was the sea spirit's world walker? Yu looked at the long gray leather rolled up in the wooden box. He took it out and unraveled it, revealing a square piece of jade. That's right, it was a rectangular square pillar. There were countless dents on its surface and even traces of flames burning it, as if it had experienced a great calamity. But it wasn't damaged at all. In particular, within this square jade, there was a key sealed inside. It was perfectly intact. Yu had a dignified expression. He picked it up and carefully examined it. There were no signs of refining at all. So how had this key been placed inside? Or Could it be that this key itself had grown out from the square jade? But no matter what possibility it was, there was one thing he was sure of, and that was that this square jade wasn't an ordinary object. The key that the priest had given him must have played a great role. Thinking about it, it seemed that it was related to the secrets of the world, as well as the sea spirit's awakening. Qin Yu didn't know what the world was, but he had already touched upon the strength of the sea spirit. This was absolutely a level that surpassed his boundary and imagination. Qin Yu grasped the key and his eyes flashed. Perhaps he should find a chance to ask the priest about this. Chapter 234. Following that, everything was calm and tranquil. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. News that the sea sovereign was about to cross tribulation was still in a highly restricted state. But as long as they had the qualifications to touch upon the highest circles of authority, they would be notified. On one hand, they did everything they could to control their subordinates so that they wouldn't be suspected by His Majesty at this critical moment and be purged. On the other hand, they stared at the royal palace with wide eyes. When His Majesty crossed tribulation, whether he succeeded or failed, it would inevitably cause a great storm. If they could grasp this opportunity, it would be an excellent opportunity. Of course, this opportunity could be good or bad. If they walked the right path, they would be filled with riches and glory. But if they walked the wrong path, they would fall into an abyss beyond redemption. At noon, when the coral was at its brightest red, the skies above the royal palace quietly darkened. This color was extremely light, like the coloring of a landscape painting. It carried with it a deep and profound aura. As soon as it appeared, it attracted the attention of countless people. Most of the capital city's sea folk revealed looks of surprise, not knowing what was happening. But at this time, the true great figures began to feel their heartbeats quicken and their complexions turn incomparably dignified. His Majesty, he had begun. Although they already knew this was happening, it was only when His Majesty truly began to cross tribulation that they discovered what was happening. The shock they received in advance was on a completely different level. Soupman paced around anxiously like an ant on a hot pan. "Old turtle, do you think His Majesty will be fine?" "Pa pa pa, my mouth is really asking for a beating. What sort of character is His Majesty? Since he chose to cross tribulation, he must have confidence in himself." But even though he said this, he still couldn't help but walk around in circles, rambling on and on. Turtle Origin was distraught. He shouted out, "Can you stop? My eyes are going blind." Soupman clenched his teeth. "I also want to stop, but I can't. If I stop, I will panic." "You disgraceful old thing. What are you panicking for? You actually have no confidence in His Majesty. You really deserve to die." Turtle Origin didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he cursed himself. That's enough. Qin Yu was able to kill the whale sovereign. Disregarding how he did it, just this point alone is enough for him to stand at the peak of the world. If he joins forces with His Majesty, that is absolutely the strongest combination in the world. The chances of them successfully crossing tribulation are extremely high. Moreover, do you not know what Qin Yu does? He has caused more heavenly tribulations than you and I have ever seen combined. Since he has agreed to help His Majesty, he should know that if he fails, he will not have a good ending. So, don't worry, everything will be fine. Soupman nodded again and again. He had an excited expression on his face that seemed to say, "You're right, I worship you too much." But in the blink of an eye, his face turned into a sad one. "You old turtle, do you think I don't understand your temperament? You've always been lazy and undisciplined. How could you possibly speak so many words at once? The more you say, the less confident you are. Don't try to lie to me." Turtle Origin was so angry that he felt his teeth ache. At this time, we should just comfort each other. Even if you sense something, why did you have to say it? Now, he was starting to panic. The few patches of darkness in the sky above the royal palace suddenly became thicker. Like ink ingots falling into water, they began to quickly melt. As a result, the water turned black and covered the entire pond in the blink of an eye. Moreover, it continued to spread outwards at an astonishing speed. All of this took a long time to describe, but it actually happened shockingly fast. In the blink of an eye, the entire sky above the capital city was covered in darkness. The rolling black clouds were strangely silent, but the terrifying aura that fell down caused everyone's hearts to tremble. Countless sea folk widened their eyes. His eyes widened, and his face was filled with fear and shock. He didn't know what had happened. Crossing tribulation? But the key point was that they had never seen heavenly tribulation on such a large scale and with such a terrifying momentum. In the grand hall, the sea sovereign looked up. His eyes seemed to pierce through the roof and fall onto the vast and mighty tribulation clouds. He took a deep breath and slowly stood up. His movements were incomparably slow and stiff. But with this simple movement, a heaven-shaking roar echoed through the air, as if a monstrous tide were crashing into the heavens. This sound was astonishing. In the blink of an eye, it reverberated through the entire capital city. Countless sea folk paled. It was like a mountain was pressing down on their chests, making it difficult for them to even breathe. This was because what accompanied this terrifying sound was an unimaginably boundless aura. This sort of pressure that could crush all left their minds panic-stricken. Deep underground, in a place that no one could see, the terrifying vine crazily tumbled about. Countless vines withered and leaves fell to the ground. The strength that the sea sovereign had stored within its body began to rapidly withdraw. This sort of rapid withdrawal was extremely damaging to the vine, but it silently withstood it, not resisting at all. This was because it was well aware that only when the sea sovereign took back his strength would it have a chance of surviving. Otherwise, its fate would be destruction. The sea sovereign straightened his body. He was like a peerless divine sword that hadn't been unsheathed for hundreds of years. He recklessly revealed his own aura, announcing his existence to the world. Boundless, thick, dignified, and powerful aura rose up like a beacon, towering between the heavens and earth. Starting from the dragon throne beneath him, the ground and even the entire grand hall began to crack. Then, like smoke, it shattered into countless pieces that scattered across the earth. To others, this place was the center of the royal palace, the place where the highest authority in the world lay. But to the sea sovereign, this was only a cage that had imprisoned him for over 300 years. Since he had chosen to cross tribulation, there was naturally no need for this place to exist any longer. As the grand hall broke apart, it was no longer able to block out the might of the heavens and earth. Strong winds howled, stirring up the sea sovereign's robes. His black hair fluttered behind him. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the boiling tribulation clouds in the skies above. This feeling of freedom, I haven't felt it in a long time. Chinyu stood outside the grand hall and watched as it disintegrated. At this time, he lightly said, "Your Majesty, rest assured that after today, the skies are high and the seas are wide. There will no longer be any hindrance to you." The sea sovereign laughed out loud. "The skies are high and the seas are wide." Good, this solitude likes these words. "But you should know that if there is an accident in crossing tribulation, you will accompany this solitude to the Yellow Springs. If he failed to cross tribulation, the sea sovereign would naturally die. Even so, with his status, he wasn't just trying to scare someone. Chinyu was well aware that if the sea sovereign died, he would also die. But his expression remained calm. "To be able to travel to the Yellow Springs with your Majesty is an honor, but I still have many worries in this world, so I do not wish to die. I can only disappoint your Majesty's good intentions." "Ha ha! Chinyu, this solitude has only just discovered that you are truly a wonderful person." The sea sovereign looked up. "But for now, this solitude will first see just how powerful this heavenly tribulation is. Do not interfere." Bang! A heaven-shaking explosion seemed to split apart the heavens and earth. Blazing lightning instantly flashed. Countless sea folk were left aghast. They subconsciously closed their eyes, tears flowing down their cheeks. Then there was a terrifying sound like the collapse of the heavens and the seas. It roared into their ears and rumbled in their minds. There was a great wave in the sea. Everyone impatiently opened their eyes, wanting to know just what was happening. They saw a figure standing proudly beneath the tribulation clouds. A terrifying aura swirled around him like a dragon. He wore bright yellow robes that were slightly damaged. His neatly combed hair was a bit messy. But this didn't destroy his aura. Rather, it made one feel even more dignified and overbearing. Boundless and vast, he looked down on all directions as if he were the center of the world. Because a terrifying aura surrounded him and space twisted around him, it was impossible to see his appearance. But this aura, this cultivation, there was only one person in the entire sea region. His Majesty. He was a supreme existence that controlled the rise and fall of the sea folk. The sea folk were shocked and then suddenly realized. No wonder the heavenly tribulation had such momentum today. It was because the one crossing tribulation was His Majesty. Although this was a secret and no one knew what boundary His Majesty's cultivation had reached, the capital city's sea folk were well informed and knew that His Majesty had touched upon a very, very high threshold. Just one more step and he would surpass the limits of strength in this world. But this threshold wasn't easy to cross. This was something that could be concluded from the fact that His Majesty had never appeared in front of others for several hundred years. Then, could His Majesty successfully cross tribulation today? The sea folk felt their hearts skip a beat and their eyes widened. What is going on? His Majesty is crossing tribulation on his own? Where's Chinyu? Where is that bastard Chinyu? Superman flew into a rage. He swallowed so many of my treasures. If he can't help His Majesty cross tribulation, then I will skin him alive and burn his bones to ashes. Turtle Origin sneered. He even killed the whale sovereign. If you go there, you'll just be seeking your own death. Superman roared, I don't care. As long as he can't help His Majesty, I will kill him. He turned his head, his eyes ferocious. At this time, you actually have the mood to sneer and remain so calm? Aren't you worried about His Majesty? So what if I am worried? Do you think you and I can rush up and help His Majesty resist heavenly tribulation? Turtle Origin lightly said, don't blindly worry about it. Right now, His Majesty wants to rely on his own strength to resist heavenly tribulation. On the contrary, this gives me even more confidence. If His Majesty dares to do this, then he must have the confidence to do so. These words seemed to make a lot of sense. Superman was stunned. As he looked at His Majesty in the skies, he took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. He constantly told himself that it was still early and it wasn't the time to go crazy. Princess Lushy had a nervous expression. Her hands were entwined together. She stood together with her fellow brothers and sisters, watching as her father crossed tribulation. Only a few people knew that Chinyu had been brought to the capital city. She quietly thought to herself, Chinyu, as long as you can help my father cross tribulation, then all grudges between us will be written off. You must not disappoint me. Rumble, rumble. The second bolt of heavenly tribulation descended. The sea sovereign laughed. Come then. He stepped into the skies. With a flick of his sleeves, monstrous strength surged outwards. His momentum was like a great river that came from the east, directly crushing apart the thunder. This solitude has avoided you for several hundred years, but now it seems that your strength is only SOSO. The sea sovereign's momentum soared. Come, come, come. This solitude is right here, waiting for you to kill me. In the black vault of heaven, two blood-red lights suddenly appeared. They were shaped like two eyeballs that locked onto him. Thus, the aura of the tribulation clouds suddenly deepened. The air became thick and viscous, like an invisible swamp that wanted to submerge and swallow everything. Chapter 235. The third thunder descended. A faint trace of red appeared, like a flower blooming in spring. It was light and gentle, but as it fell into one's eyes, it caused one's mind to sink. It was like a collapsing mountain, capable of destroying everything. The sea sovereign wildly laughed as he punched out. His momentum was like a moving mountain and sea. Wild strength tumbled around him like a fierce tiger breaking out of its cage, mercilessly biting down. The tribulation thunder was cut in half. After several breaths of time, it was torn apart into countless pieces that tumbled and dissipated. The pale blood-colored heavenly tribulation clearly contained a terrifying might. But the sea sovereign didn't even give it a chance to display its strength before it was torn apart once more. Chinyu sighed inwardly. He was truly worthy of being the ruler of the sea region, the person with the highest authority in the world. He truly had the strength to match his status. He was powerful to an inconceivable degree. He had broken through nascent soul and formed an undying divine soul. Just how terrifying was the might of heavenly tribulation. But in front of him, it had been easily rolled over. The sea sovereign's true cultivation was likely several times stronger than the whale sovereign's. Compared to Pill Crucible and the demon monarch, he was also a level weaker. Disregarding the existences that Chinyu didn't know about, the sea sovereign could be called the #1 powerhouse in the world. But the more this was the case, the more it proved that today's heavenly tribulation wasn't as simple as it seemed. Golden Core Tribulation Thunder, 1. Nascent Soul Tribulation Thunder, 3. Divine Soul Tribulation Thunder, 9. Perhaps these 3 bolts of tribulation thunder were only the appetizer. Otherwise, with the sea sovereign's pride, he would have been forced to avoid heavenly tribulation for over 300 years, trapped in his dragon throne without daring to leave. Little blue lamp, can you really do this? Chinyu's eyes revealed a trace of worry. But in the next moment, he forcefully suppressed it. With things having come to this point, no matter how powerful the heavenly tribulation was, he could only continue forwards. There was no turning back. The 4th tribulation thunder was a deep red. The 5th tribulation thunder was as red as blood. The 6th tribulation thunder was blood red. The sea sovereign's tall and straight figure was forced back for the first time. His bright yellow robes were scorched black, and his face paled. The shock waves of the collision with the heavenly tribulation were like a hurricane, instantly sweeping through the entire capital city. Countless tall buildings were shaved off and then turned to powder. The terrifying explosion left the minds of the sea folk buzzing. Their eyes widened in horror. Even though they were very far away, they could still sense how powerful the 6th bolt of tribulation lightning was. If it had been them, they would have been reduced to ashes in the blink of an eye. The people of the royal capital subconsciously revealed astonished expressions. Their cultivations were higher, so they could sense how terrifying the tribulation lightning was. The fact that His Majesty was only slightly injured and took a few steps back after taking the thunderhead on was already far beyond their expectations. However, this was only the 6th thunderbolt. There are still 3 bolts of tribulation lightning. They muttered in their hearts. Soup Man was stunned. As he looked at His Majesty being forced back, he was well aware that if it weren't for the fact that he couldn't resist it, then with His Majesty's prideful nature and the anger that he had hidden for over 300 years, it was absolutely impossible for him to retreat. Although it was only a pale complexion, Soup Man was sure that His Majesty was injured. He was definitely injured. Chinyu, hurry up and make your move. The low roar was overflowing with ruthlessness. Nothing must happen to His Majesty. Absolutely not. Turtle Origin's face sank. His Majesty is fine. I know it's fine, but this is only the 6th thunderbolt. You and I both know that the Divine Soul has 9 tribulation lightning bolts, and every 3 bolts form a step. The might of the 7th thunder far surpasses that of the 6th. His Majesty cannot take it anymore. Turtle Origin fell silent. He looked at the sea sovereign's back and gently sighed. With His Majesty's intelligence, how could he not have guessed this? But even if he knew, he still wouldn't retreat. His Majesty was still the majesty of the past. 300 years of being imprisoned had only tempered his mind to become more tenacious and formidable. Although heavenly tribulation was terrifying, he still had to fight to the last moment. Qin Yu's body tensed. Within his Dantian sea, the five-element golden cores shined with a brilliant light. He was already prepared to attack. But at this time, in the skies, the sea sovereign slowly said, "This solitude is fine." Qin Yu was startled. A look of admiration appeared in his eyes. In all fairness, if he were in Qin Yu's shoes, he might have been able to last until the sixth thunder. But he would clearly be severely wounded, and there might even be the threat of death at the seventh thunder. He should have chosen to give up. The ruler of the sea races truly had the pride and self-confidence that a ruler should have. The seventh thunder, a faint purple light. Compared to the purple corals in the sea, it was much thinner. But this purple light was like the sharpest sword in the world. Purple energy came from the east, instantly crossing space and piercing into the depths of the soul. Qin Yu's pupils shrank. He could feel the true terror of the seventh thunder. It actually had the strength to affect the soul. But thinking about it, it was normal for divine, soul, heavenly tribulation to involve the soul. But even though it was normal, if there was even the slightest mistake, then he would be struck by the pale purple tribulation thunder. Even a powerful existence like the sea sovereign wouldn't be able to escape. In the blink of an eye, the purple lightning submerged the sea sovereign. Qin Yu's complexion was heavy. The sea sovereign's reaction had been too slow. If he couldn't withstand it, then perhaps Qin Yu would have to consider how to escape. A resonant roar rang out. Within the purple lightning, the phantom of a 1,000-foot flood dragon appeared. A massive portion of its scales had shattered and blood wildly gushed out from its wounds. In the next moment, this blood was completely evaporated by the lightning, revealing flesh and blood underneath. Underneath the ravaging lightning, it was soon charred black. The flood dragon roared, its massive body twisting as if it wanted to tear apart the lightning. Princess Lushy's tears fell like rain. She could feel just what sort of intense pain her father was withstanding right now. Qin Yu, you bastard, where are you? Why haven't you done anything yet? Turtle Origin stubbornly held onto Soup Man. Their auras collided, causing the void to rumble. Calm down, calm down. If you rush out now, there's no use at all. You will only add to His Majesty's troubles. I won't add to His Majesty's troubles. I will chop up Qin Yu. That bastard, he still hasn't done anything. I will kill him, I will kill him. Soup Man roared out again and again. Turtle Origin bitterly smiled. He could only desperately hold on to Qin Yu. He looked up into the skies. Within the purple lightning, the flood dragon's struggles seemed to weaken a little. This caused his heart to tighten. Your Majesty, are you going to give up your life for your pride? That would be far too funny. Or was there really a problem with Qin Yu? Was he deliberately not saving His Majesty? Thinking of this possibility, Turtle Origin stiffened. He subconsciously retracted his hand that was holding on to Soup Man. Turtle Origin was shaken away. Soup Man rushed out, straight towards the center of the royal palace, straight towards the ruined Grand Hall. Qin Yu, a cruel roar echoed through the royal palace. Princess Lushy's heart skipped a beat. It was unknown what she was thinking, but her complexion paled. The surrounding princes and princesses all revealed shocked expressions. They didn't know just what had happened. Soup Man was actually so angry, and he even shouted out Qin Yu's name. Even with their status, this name was like a thunderclap that reverberated in their ears. The whale's sovereign had been killed. Such explosive news had already spread throughout the entire sea region as the powerhouses from all sides left. Of course, as for how Qin Yu had left, it wasn't said in detail. Most of it was hastily mentioned. What nonsense! Could it be that their group had been beaten so badly by Qin Yu that they didn't even dare to move, and then they were forced to lower their heads and admit defeat by Turtle Origin? Of course, they couldn't slap themselves in the face. Thus, news of Qin Yu being brought back to the capital city didn't spread out. Could it be that Qin Yu had returned? Was His Majesty's sudden decision to cross tribulation related to him? As they were thinking this, they saw Princess Lushy rush out. The princes and princesses were stunned for a moment before they hurriedly followed behind. Outside the shattered Grand Hall, Qin Yu frowned. He turned around. Soupman's figure raced forwards, a crazed look in his eyes. Chinyu. Soupman felt his field of vision darken. He was immediately sent flying away by a boundless strength, crashing into a grand hall. With a loud rumbling sound, the grand hall collapsed. Princess Lushy and the others just happened to arrive. As they saw this, they were shocked. Soupman's strength could be considered a peak existence within the royal palace. Although he was still a distance away from His Majesty and Mr. Turtle, to be able to send him flying away in a single exchange, just what sort of strength did this require? As they looked down, they saw Chinyu's calm face. They couldn't help but feel awe. He was truly worthy of being a powerful existence that had killed the whale Sovereign in a frontal confrontation. His strength was truly astonishing. The collapsed Grand Hall was sent flying away. Soupman drilled out with a distressed expression. He clenched his teeth and said, Chinyu, even if you have transcendent abilities, if something happens to His Majesty, I will make sure you die without a grave. Chinyu's eyes flashed with a cold light. Turtle Origin hurried over. He hurriedly said, Chinyu, Soupman is only worried about His Majesty. Don't take this to heart. Chinyu coldly snorted. Keep an eye on him. It won't be so simple next time. Princess Lushy suddenly said, Chinyu, hurry up and help my father. I know you can do it. Chinyu shook his head. You underestimate His Majesty too much. Before his voice fell, a dragon's roar echoed out once more. In the skies, the flood dragon's body expanded by 30%, tearing apart the purple lightning. The flood dragon howled as it flew forwards. As it neared the ground, it transformed into a human form. The sea sovereign's complexion paled and blood dripped down from the corners of his lips. Divine soul, heavenly tribulation is truly formidable. This solitude blocking the seventh thunder tribulation is already my limit. Chinyu, it's your turn now. Chinyu nodded. Without speaking further, he turned and stepped forwards, directly facing the tribulation clouds and ascending into the skies. Your Majesty, are you all right? Soupman anxiously asked from afar. The sea sovereign waved his hand. I'm fine. Princess Lushy revealed a happy expression. But as her eyes fell on Chinyu, her heart tightened. The seventh tribulation thunder was already so terrifying. The remaining eighth and ninth tribulation thunder were clearly even more terrifying. Could Chinyu block them? Moreover, because of the interference of external forces, the might of the heavenly tribulation would increase. It would likely be far more terrifying than normal. As she was worrying, in the capital city, countless eyes lit up as they stared at Chinyu's figure. As the most famous existence in the sea region, he was instantly recognized by everyone. No wonder His Majesty suddenly wanted to cross tribulation. With the doubts in their hearts solved, what followed was excitement. Within Moon Praying Shrine, Chinyu had helped over 200 sea folk nascent souls. Regardless of how strong or weak the heavenly tribulation was, it had all vanished from sight. How had he done this? This was the greatest question that lingered in the hearts of all the sea folk. Now, there was finally a chance to unravel this mystery. All the sea folk widened their eyes. Even the sea sovereign stared at Chinyu, waiting for what he would do next. Rumble, rumble, rumble. A dazzling purple light howled forth like a waterfall. Its aura shook the heavens and earth, capable of extinguishing all things. Chapter 236. Chinyu's body tensed. A feeling of being locked onto by a higher existence rose up from the depths of his heart, transforming into an instinctive fear. His soul shivered, his body stiffened like iron, and his heart nearly stopped beating. This was the might of the eighth tribulation thunder. Before it truly erupted, its aura was already hard to contend with. But this process only lasted for a short period of time. Within his soul space, the little blue lamp suddenly cried out. Then, a strange aura fused into Chinyu's soul. All of his fear retreated like a tide, leaving behind only a calm and indifference. It was like a gaze looking down from above, one that carried a bit of carelessness and confidence that everything was under control. That's right, it was the kind of will that controlled everything. At this moment, everyone discovered a change in Qin Yu's aura. He suddenly became calm, and although he didn't move, this feeling was clearly transmitted. It was as if the tribulation thunder in front of him, and even the tribulation clouds in the skies were nothing to him at all. Then, Qin Yu moved. He grasped forwards. Yes, it was a simple action. He straightened his arm and then grasped it. It was natural and casual, as if he were catching a falling leaf from a tree. But the key point was that what he faced now was the terrifying eighth tribulation thunder. What he reached out to grab was also this. To directly touch tribulation thunder with his mortal body. Did Qin Yu want to commit suicide? All of the sea folk that saw this, whether they were strong or weak, couldn't help but widen their eyes in disbelief. Subman's feet softened and he fell to the ground. He didn't care about Qin Yu's life or death, but it was clear that he was in the same boat as His Majesty. Bastard, bastard. If you want to die, then why did you harm His Majesty? Princess Lushi nearly cried out in alarm. She opened her small mouth, opening it wider and wider until it was large enough to swallow a salted duck egg. But at this time, no one noticed the princess' shameful appearance, because everyone was in the same state. Everyone's eyes widened, making one worry that they would explode in the next second. Qin Yu had grabbed the tribulation thunder. He had grabbed the eighth tribulation thunder, the incomparably terrifying deep purple eighth tribulation thunder. He had said it 3 times. Okay, he had really grabbed it. It was like a rope, a branch, or a leaf floating in the air. No matter how much the purple tribulation thunder struggled, wildly roaring, it couldn't break free. The spreading lightning submerged Qin Yu's entire body. However, it was clear that even though the lightning was leaping about, it did not cause him any harm at all. Everyone was speechless. That's right, they all knew that Qin Yu had a way to deal with heavenly tribulation. But no one knew that his methods were exaggerated to such an extent. Catching heavenly tribulation with one hand, Big Brother, was there anything more absurd and ridiculous than this in this world? If I didn't see it with my own eyes, who would dare to say such a thing? I would definitely smash his head. Pooh, bragging right in front of me, looking for sh*t. But this is real. My God, the sea folk groaned inwardly. They wanted to tremble and sing the song of conquest. Suddenly, the eighth tribulation lightning began to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a few breaths of time, only half of its original size remained. He had been devoured. I'm not surprised. I'm already used to it. I can even grab heavenly tribulations with my bare hands. So what's the big deal about swallowing heavenly tribulations? Why was his mouth so wide open? Nonsense. Was it supposed to open now? I haven't closed my eyes at all. Fortunately, I have foresight. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to open it again after closing it. It shrank by half, and then another half. Soon, the tribulation lightning had turned into a rope. One end was in Qin Yu's hand, and the other end was connected to the tribulation clouds. The eighth tribulation lightning caused a connection to form between them. Then, the sea folk discovered that the tribulation clouds that covered the capital city began to wildly surge. This sort of surge was different from the pressure that had descended before. It was filled with a bit of panic and fear. They rubbed their eyes. Was this an illusion? The tribulation clouds represented the will of the world. So how could they be afraid? You must be kidding me. But in the next moment, a sudden scene occurred that refreshed their worldview once more. Within the tribulation clouds that covered the capital city, a part of it cracked open. The several thousand feet wide tribulation cloud in the center was separated from a main body of the tribulation cloud. And it just so happened that the end of the eighth tribulation lightning was connected here. In the blink of an eye, the several thousand feet wide tribulation cloud vanished from sight. The eighth tribulation lightning vanished along with it. No matter how one looked at it, this was like cutting off an arm to survive. Qin Yu had actually forced the tribulation cloud to this step. Many sea folk suddenly heard a loud cracking sound, followed by pained cries. Their jaws fell to the ground, and more importantly, Chinyu had used his bare hands to grab the heavenly tribulation and swallow it clean. It was like he had eaten a sweet and juicy sugar cane without using any external force. This was even more terrifying. Heavens! 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 Since when did the human race become so impregnable? There was actually someone who could beat up heavenly tribulation like this, let alone hearing about it. This had never happened in history. After all, there was a limit to bragging. The sea sovereign's eyes were unprecedentedly solemn. Even with his cultivation, he never imagined that such a scene would occur. Chinyu, this solitude really underestimated you. Superman shrank his head back and subconsciously took a step back. His majesty was safe and his anger had subsided. He finally regained some of his sanity, but he couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. This brat Chinyu, he was actually fierce to such a degree. Luckily, the old turtle stopped him just now, otherwise I would have definitely died. When a tribulation is over, should I leave early? Cough, cough. If we meet again, it will be a bit awkward. Even someone like Superman, who was so nervous and loyal to the sea sovereign, was thinking about what would happen after crossing tribulation. It could be seen that the vast majority of the sea folk already believed that His Majesty's heavenly tribulation would no longer be a problem. Of course, this was a direct result of the shocking scene of Chinyu grabbing heavenly tribulation with his bare hands like he was eating a sugar cane. Even if the ninth tribulation thunder was even more terrifying, so what? To a freak like Chinyu, it was nothing more than a thicker sugar cane. Perhaps it would even be sweeter. Princess Lushy was overjoyed. But soon, she realized that this joy was also because Chinyu was safe and sound. She couldn't help but grit her teeth. This heartless fellow already had a woman he liked, so why was he still thinking about him? He was just too useless. But as she thought this, her eyes were still a bit blurry as she looked at his figure. A young girl would always yearn for the opposite sex. This was an instinct that had nothing to do with status or status. Within the royal palace, or perhaps the entire capital city, everyone entered into a state of joy. His Majesty had successfully crossed tribulation, and an unprecedented divine soul realm existence would appear amongst the sea races. This was bound to be an enormous benefit to the entire sea races. But at this time, Chinyu actually frowned. His eyes darkened as he looked at the tribulation clouds that were missing a piece in the middle. He could feel a strange aura. Within his soul space, the little blue lamb's cries became even more intense. Something didn't seem right. The sea sovereign was the one crossing tribulation, and his cultivation was also the highest. He was the first to sense that something was wrong with the tribulation clouds. Slowly, more and more sea folk revealed looks of surprise. Why hadn't the ninth tribulation thunder descended yet? Suddenly, the tribulation clouds that covered the capital city began to contract at an extremely fast speed. After several breaths of time, all that was left over was a massive black fog. It wasn't static. Its surface constantly bulged and changed shape, as if some sort of life form were being bred within, struggling to be born. What was going on? The sea folk all had stunned expressions. Even those who considered themselves knowledgeable and had broad horizons were left dizzy at this time. It was already horrifying to see someone grab heavenly tribulation with their bare hands. Could there be some other special surprise? Could it be that they couldn't withstand being shocked again and again? A light aura sprinkled down from the fog. The sea sovereign stuffily coughed. His body shivered, as if he were carrying an invisible mountain on his back. He was the one crossing tribulation, so he was the first to sense the changes in heavenly tribulation. Turtle Origin, Superman, and the others all paled. It hadn't even truly appeared, and yet His Majesty found it hard to withstand it. No matter how terrifying the ninth tribulation thunder was, it shouldn't have reached this step. Just what was happening? Perhaps Chinyu knew. The Worldsville had always wanted to erase the little blue lamp, but it was trapped by the rules and had been unable to do so. Thus, it had always been waiting for an opportunity. Now, it had finally arrived. Helping the sea sovereign cross tribulation and interfering with the birth of his divine soul might have touched upon some restriction of the rules. Thus, the Worldsville was able to mobilize an even stronger strength and send down a destructive power. Thus, it had acted, leading to the scene before them. Of course, there might be other reasons as well, but this was the most likely one. A roar rang out, carrying with it a boundless aura. It seemed to come from the great desolate, carrying with it the lingering charm of the endless years. But even more, it was cruel and ruthless, bloodthirsty and murderous. Just this roar alone caused the entire capital city and countless sea folk to feel as if they were placed in an azure field. The thick killing intent caused their complexions to pale. The black fog was as thick as the night. A gap was pierced through and then swallowed up like a whale. The figure being bred within finally appeared in front of them. It was a thunder beast that was over 100 feet tall. In Moon-Praying Shrine, when the first 5 golden core heavenly tribulations fused together, the thunder beast that appeared was only a phantom. But this thunder beast was truly flesh and blood. Of course, it was impossible for a thunder beast to be born from the tribulation clouds. But its current appearance and aura was completely the same as the legendary god beast that wielded the wrath of the heavens and earth, the one that ruthlessly destroyed all. It was like the shrinking tribulation clouds had opened up a gate of time and space, allowing this terrifying life form that only existed in legends to cross the river of time and arrive at the sea race capital city to destroy the people it wanted to destroy. The thunder beast lowered its head, its giant eyes locking on Chinyu. There was no warmth in them at all. Then its figure moved. In the void, over a dozen thunder beasts appeared, linking together in a line. These were all afterimages that appeared because they were too fast. Without giving anyone time to respond, it appeared beside Chinyu. Then it opened its mouth and swallowed him whole. Ah! Princess Lushy screamed out loud. Gulp! The clear sound of swallowing spread into the ears of countless sea folk, causing them to feel as if this was all unreal. Chinyu, who had been so awesome and flashy all this time, had ended like this? But feeling the dreadful slaughter aura that the thunder beast emitted, there was no need to doubt it. The thunder beast lowered its head, its icy cold eyes falling on the sea sovereign. It roared and turned to leave, vanishing from the skies above the capital city. The tribulation clouds had vanished and the thunder beast had left. Could this mean that His Majesty had crossed his heavenly tribulation? Chapter 237. The thunder beast was just like its name. It was tyrannical and tyrannical like thunder, and it was also as fast as lightning. It flew out of the capital city and into the deep sea. Moments later, it entered a dark abyss at the bottom of the sea. It sunk to the bottom of the abyss and stretched out its body. Runes the size of a knuckle appeared on the surface of its body, swimming about like a living creature. As if an invisible force had descended, the icy cold seawater was forced apart. With the thunder beast as the center, a vast expanse of emptiness appeared. If someone saw this scene, they would discover that the seawater was empty. It was shaped like a square cauldron with feet and a mouth. The thunder beast closed its eyes, and the leaping lightning on its body receded. The abyss at the bottom of the sea was once again shrouded in darkness, returning to the cold and deathly stillness it had been since ancient times. Chinyu felt as if he were immersed in a sea of thunder. As far as he could see, everything was a deep purple. Boundless waves roared, each wave carrying with it a fatal destructive strength. However, the moment the lightning touched his body, it was completely absorbed and did not cause him any harm at all. At this time, Chinyu could already confirm that the Sea Sovereign's 9th Tribulation Thunder was targeting him. Then, things should not be so simple. Since the World's Will was taking action, it should have some degree of confidence in itself. It wouldn't be like it was now, passing strength to the little blue lamp for free. Something must be wrong. As Chinyu was deep in thought, his body stiffened. He looked up at the runes that appeared on his fingertips, and his complexion became dignified. He had never seen these runes before, but the moment he saw them, a great fear rose up in his soul. Bang! Within his Dantian sea, the 5-element golden cores erupted in a wild magic power, surged forth. But the runes on his fingertips didn't dissipate because of the impact. Rather, they became even clearer. Then, a smear of black ash appeared on his fingertip and spread toward his palm. The area that was invaded by the black-gray color lost all feeling, as if it was no longer a part of his body. Qin Yu's eyes lit up with anger. The black and gray runes were inevitably related to the will of the world. This was its true killing move. As for how these runes had invaded his body, if he was not mistaken, it should be the lightning before him. If the little blue lamp swallowed the tribulation thunder, it would bring the toxic runes into his body. But if he didn't swallow them, he would instantly be blown to smithereens. That's right, the target of the world's will had shifted from the little blue lamp to Qin Yu. Perhaps it had already sensed the change in Qin Yu's relationship with the little blue lamp. After recognizing a master, the little blue lamp would share weal and woe. If Qin Yu died, the little blue lamp would inevitably suffer heavy losses. It could be said that it was a roundabout attack. Qin Yu bit the tip of his tongue and forced himself to calm down. There was no meaning in thinking about these things right now. He had to think of a way to survive the world's slaughter. The grayish-black color spread across his palm and crawled toward his wrist. At the same time, runes also began to appear on his palm. Clearly, he didn't have much time left. Qin Yu wasn't curious at all as to what would happen when the black ash covered his entire body, nor did he want to know. Rumble, the qi and blood in his body surged like the tide, rolling and roaring. His full strength erupted, and the black-gray corrosion rate slowed down slightly. But the most this could do was buy Qin Yu a little more time. It was meaningless to the final result. Within his Dantian sea, the little blue lamp was strangely quiet, as if it didn't know what was happening around it. Qin Yu took a deep breath and suppressed the urge to question it. Perhaps the little blue lamp was thinking about it right now. He wasn't worried that the little blue lamp would stand idly by. The two of them were already one, and if something happened to him, the little blue lamp would inevitably be implicated. Moreover, the world's will's fundamental request was to destroy it. Without the lips, the teeth would be cold. There was no way it wouldn't understand such a simple truth. Suddenly, with a loud cry, the surface of the little blue lamp began to release a faint blue light. Then, it fell onto the great Tao base and began to slowly fuse into it. It was like a precious pearl had been embedded into the great Tao base. Qin Yu instantly sensed the changes in his body, as well as the closer connection between him and the little blue lamp. He sighed inwardly. Indeed, there were many tricks in this world. If he wasn't careful, he would fall into one. Recognizing a master was recognizing a master. It was so simple and direct. Who knew that this sort of thing was actually divided into levels? If he were to divide it, entering Qin Yu's Dantian Sea should be considered an initial master recognition. Fusing into the great Tao base was considered a deeper master recognition. But his intuition told him that this wasn't the end. In other words, even at this step, he still couldn't be considered the little blue lamp's true master. However, sighing was just sighing. After the little blue lamp fused into the great Tao base, there were still some effects. For instance, the ash-black color that spread out from his limbs was forced to stop. Then it was slowly expelled, and his control over his body was restored. The crisis had been resolved. Qin Yu let out a sigh of relief. But he subconsciously frowned. The world's will represented the world itself, and was a part of the rules. Since it had schemed to deal with the little blue lamp, could it be that it didn't know what methods it had? It had waited so long for a chance to brazenly kill it. Could it be that it had started anticlimactic and ended on a weak note? He always felt that this was too simple. Reality proved that sometimes being too cautious and meticulous wasn't a good thing, because when an accident occurred, he always felt that it was because he had jinxed it. A loud humming sound echoed out in Qin Yu's soul space. On the surface of his body, where the ash-black color had been expelled, countless runes appeared. Then, a gentle but incomparably sharp aura appeared. It was like a cool autumn breeze, carrying with it a faint chill as it brushed past Qin Yu's soul. Originally, This degree of contact shouldn't have caused too much damage to Qin Yu's soul. But the key point was that after the whale's sovereign soul exploded, the cracks in Qin Yu's soul hadn't been repaired. This cool autumn breeze was like the last straw that broke the camel's back. But it also seemed like some sort of meticulous preparation, something specially designed for Qin Yu. Thus, a severe pain surged out from his soul. It was like countless hands were grabbing onto a corner of his soul and forcefully pulling outwards, wanting to tear it into countless pieces. As the pain assaulted him, Qin Yu suddenly understood. He feared that fusing the little blue lamp into the great Tao base and helping him expel the ash-black color was already within the calculations of the world's will. It wanted to strengthen the connection between the little blue lamp and Qin Yu, so that when it killed Qin Yu, it could inflict greater damage to the little blue lamp. So, from start to finish, he had only been a primer, a part of the plan. This left Qin Yu a bit helpless, but also a bit of anticipation. The little blue lamp's initial silence, allowing the ash-black color to invade him, was because it had sensed that something was wrong and had made some sort of preparations. So he might not die. Within the great Tao base, the little blue lamp shined with a brilliant light. It was so blazing that Qin Yu felt as if a great sun had risen in the east, so bright that he couldn't look straight at it. Thus, beneath this light, everything came to a standstill. The runes on the surface of Qin Yu's body, his collapsing soul, the half-opened eyes of the thunder beast outside, and even further out in the sea, there were several strange deep-sea fish that swam over out of curiosity. At this moment, no one knew that deep in the sea, in an abyss at the bottom of the sea, time had come to a standstill. Even if it only covered a radius of several hundred meters, a standstill was still a standstill. Even if it only lasted for a second and the range was only a few inches, it still belonged to an unimaginable scope. What it represented was a boundary in level, one that far surpassed the understanding and imagination of the living beings of this world. Qin Yu's consciousness was clear. Perhaps it was because of his relationship with the little blue lamp, but even in this standstill time, his thoughts could still move. As he felt the pain disappear, tumbling waves rose up in his mind. The power to control time, whether it was catalyzing the growth of spiritual plants or swallowing heavenly tribulation, all of this was enough to prove just how incredible and formidable the little blue lamp was. But Qin Yu discovered that he had still underestimated its strength. Just what was it? Qin Yu didn't have time to think. Pain struck him without warning, like a mountain crushing down on him. His consciousness was on the verge of collapse. Stay awake. Fragmented sounds spread into Qin Yu's soul. He understood the meaning behind the little blue lamp's words. Life or death depended on this moment. If he could withstand it, he would live. Otherwise, he would die. He had struggled countless times to reach this day. If he were to die like this, would he be willing? Qin Yu didn't know where the strength came from, but he stubbornly defended his mind. No matter how much the pain attacked him, he wished he could tear himself to pieces, but he still clenched his teeth and persisted. He could not give up. He absolutely could not give up. Qin Yu no longer had the mind to pay attention to this. The runes that appeared on the surface of his body began to melt like metal in a blazing inferno, dissipating and fusing into his body. Within his soul space, the horrifying cracks on the surface of Qin Yu's soul began to emit motes of light. Then, the two sides of the cracks began to fuse back together. This was a slow process. After an unknown period of time, the unimaginable pain suddenly vanished. Qin Yu stubbornly persisted until a voice sounded out in his soul. It's fine. Within the indifference, there seemed to be something else. Qin Yu didn't have time to recognize it. His consciousness fell into darkness. Capital City. In the skies above, countless flowers sprinkled down. In the air, faint syllables began to ring out. The sea sovereign's body floated up on its own. The flowers fused into his body one by one. Countless sea folks' eyes widened. After a brief daze, they were wild with joy. Then, in the entire capital city, all the sea folk fell to their knees. Congratulations to your majesty for successfully crossing tribulation and advancing to divine soul. Billowing waves of voices shot into the heavens. The sea sovereign closed his eyes. When the last flower entered his body, he opened his eyes. His pupils were warm and bright, as if they contained a strength that could pierce straight into the heart. Who? A wind rose up from the capital city, lifting up the robes of the sea sovereign and causing a faint pressure to spread out in all directions. Turtle Origin's heart shook. He had nearly touched upon His Majesty's previous boundary, so he could clearly feel this aura. Was this divine soul? Soupman cried tears of joy. For an old man to cry to his heart's content and howl was terrifying. His Majesty had succeeded. He had succeeded. Good, this was far too good. At this time, this was the only thought in his mind, constantly tumbling about. Princess Lushy lowered her head. Everyone around her was cheering for her father's success, so she was also happy. But could they have forgotten that there was a person who had resisted heavenly tribulation for her father just now? As she thought of that person who had been swallowed up by the thunder beast and taken away, she felt her heart clench. Chinyu, did you die? Chapter 238. Deep Sea Abyss. The icy cold seawater was pitch black, so dark that it was hard to even see one's fingers. Chinyu lay on the seabed, half covered in mud and sand. His aura was completely gone, as if he were a piece of dead wood. Several strange fish that were born in the deep sea and had lost their eyes because they didn't see light all year round swayed their tails as they swam past him. The tail of one of the strange fish touched Chinyu's finger. Without any warning, the strange fish directly exploded, like a dark red flower blooming in the dark seawater. The rest of the strange fish with sharp senses were so frightened that they fled in all directions. But when they discovered that there was no danger, their instinctive desire for food overwhelmed their fear. They carefully approached and devoured the flesh and blood of their companions. Then, they shook their heads in satisfaction and slowly swam away. Chinyu still lay there with his eyes closed, completely unaware of what was happening outside. But after the scene just now, everyone knew what sort of terrifying strength was shaking within his body that was like dead wood. He was silent like a stone, but there were raging flames within like a volcano. In this icy cold and pitch-black environment, time seemed to drag on, but also seemed meaningless. After an unknown period of time, in the quiet and clear seabed, a trace of mud suddenly appeared. Not too far away, a carnivorous crab that had been patiently waiting for food to appear suddenly became excited. It had been starving for many days already. But soon, the carnivorous crab revealed a disappointed look. The one stirring up the mud was a big fish. Although it was hungry, it knew it wasn't its match. If it rushed over, it would only be adding more food to the other's meal. Thus, it decided to obediently wait. As the disappointed carnivorous crab lurked back into hiding, the confusion in Chinyu's eyes rapidly faded away. The chaotic memories in his mind finally began to resurface. The capital city, heavenly tribulation, Thunder Beast, it seemed that the Thunder Beast had brought him to this place. If he was alive, the Thunder Beast would naturally die. It was normal for it to disappear. Chinyu rubbed his temples, his body stiffening. He thought back to the pain he had experienced before falling unconscious. Even with his willpower, he absolutely didn't want to recall these memories. Luckily, he had survived. Chinyu sat down cross-legged, sensing the changes in his body. Soon, he revealed a pleasantly surprised smile. Those who survived a calamity were destined for good fortune. These words were indeed true. Within his soul space, his soul that had been severely wounded and covered in cracks had now been restored to its original state. Moreover, it seemed as if there were some different changes. 3 days later, somewhere in the boundless sea, the surface of the water suddenly broke open and Chinyu's figure flew out. As he looked at the great sun above his head, he revealed a light smile. Looking around, the surface of the sea was all the same. There was basically no way to determine his position. But to Chinyu, this was actually extremely simple. With a thought, A sea map appeared above his head and slowly unfurled. Chinyu looked around and determined his position. After locking onto the position of the continent, he put away the sea chart and stepped forwards, turning into a beam of light that howled away. There was a considerable distance between this place and the sea race's capital city. Of course, even if it was close, he couldn't return there. Without accident, the sea sovereign had already reached the divine soul realm. If he were to go back on his word, there would be no one he could reason with. It was better to just leave. However, there was no way to ask the priests about the key. Whoosh! A shocking rainbow streaked across the sky. 1 month later, when the endless coastline appeared in his line of sight, Chinyu smiled. He had finally returned. The location he chose wasn't too far from the fishing village that Little C had entered. Thinking about it, Chinyu concealed his aura and entered the fishing village. Little C had indeed lived here for a period of time. But around 3 months ago, she had left, and no one knew where she went. Chinyu smiled. He thanked the weather-beaten old woman in front of him and turned to leave. He had no intention of disturbing Little C's life to begin with, but since she had already left, he might never see her again in this life. He hoped that she lived a happy life. After leaving the range of the coast, the number of cultivators gradually increased. Chinyu soon discovered that the continent was filled with a tense atmosphere. And indeed, after paying a bit more attention, he found the crux of the problem. The demonic path and Immortal Eclipse Valley were like fire and water. As for the exact cause, there was no way to verify it. All he knew was that both sides had suffered serious casualties and were truly enraged. The influence of the demonic path was undoubtedly the greatest in all directions. Only if all the righteous path sects joined forces would they be able to contend with them. Immortal Eclipse Valley was known as the #1 immortal sect. They had started with pills and had a long inheritance. It was unknown just how much wealth they had accumulated and how many connections they had. They were similarly able to look down on all others. When these two sides began to fight amongst each other, it naturally had far-reaching consequences. It was understandable that they were in the current situation. Chinyu bitterly smiled. When he had casually killed Bloodthirsty Demon, small skirmishes had arisen between Immortal Eclipse Valley and the demonic path. If the current situation was said to be caused by the events of the past, then that was his responsibility. But thinking about it carefully, he didn't need to worry too much. Immortal Eclipse Valley had Pill Crucible, Jiang Li, Taoist Wang, and the others guarding it. Even the demonic path wouldn't be able to easily shake their foundation. In the future, he would think of a way to settle this matter and then make compensation. Since Chinyu entered the sea region, besides the delays he had encountered along the way, a full year had passed. He had to admit that the reason he sped up was because of the news he obtained from that mysterious cultivator at Heavenseek Pavilion. Breaking through his demon body and reaching nascent soul was the most urgent matter at hand. Once he succeeded, he would no longer have to fear anything in this world. So, even if he dreaded Heavenseek Pavilion in his heart, Chinyu still decided to make another trip there. Heavenseek Pavilion was extremely famous. They were spread throughout the Southern Empire and Northern Dynasty. As long as there was a sizable cultivator city, they would have a branch. If he wanted to find them, it would be a simple matter. 2 days later, Chinyu stepped into Heavenseek Pavilion. He didn't hide his identity, so not long after he entered, a manager personally came out to greet him. "You recognize me?" The dark-skinned, middle-aged cultivator didn't deny it. He cupped his hands together and said, "A year ago, I received a notice from headquarters that once Lord Chinyu arrived, you must be treated as an honored guest. Lord, please wait a moment. I have already passed on the news of your arrival and will soon receive a response." Chinyu nodded, no longer speaking. In a luxurious private room, Chinyu was drinking fragrant tea. The maid serving him wore a long dress that accentuated her graceful figure. Her eyes were lowered and her cheeks were flushed red, as if she were waiting for him to do as he pleased. If there really was a need, she wouldn't refuse. Unfortunately, Chinyu really only drank tea. Besides looking up at her at the beginning, there was nothing unusual about him. The maid couldn't help but bite her lips. Between her eyebrows, there was just the right amount of hidden bitterness. Not only could she express her thoughts, but she also wouldn't arouse the disgust of others. Instead, she seemed even more pitiful. Unfortunately, it was useless. An hour later, there was a knock on the door from outside. A young man walked in, a warm smile on his face. His eyes were calm and gentle. He cupped his hands together and said, "Fellow Taoist Qin Yu is truly a man of his word." Qin Yu lightly said, "Let's get down to business." The young man didn't care about his indifference. He waved his hand, and the kneeling maid stood up. She walked out and closed the door behind her. "Fellow Taoist Qin Yu is a straightforward person, so I will get straight to the point. I wonder if fellow Taoist has heard news about the Gold Noble family?" Qin Yu frowned. "Gold Noble family?" The young man sat down and poured himself a cup of tea. "It's normal that fellow Taoist Qin Yu doesn't know. The Gold Noble family is hidden extremely deeply. Besides a small number of people, no one knows of their existence. However, if one carefully considers it, the Gold Noble family should be one of the most formidable influences in the Southern Empire and Northern Dynasty." He smiled. "Fellow Taoist, don't be anxious. Since I mentioned it, I will definitely give you a satisfactory answer. However, as the price, I hope that fellow Taoist Qin Yu can agree to one thing in the future." Qin Yu frowned. He didn't come to the Heaven Seek Pavilion branch division today, but this young man had still appeared in such a short period of time. It was impossible to know what this meant, but Qin Yu still felt a bit more dread in his heart. The young man lightly said, "Fellow Taoist Qin Yu, there is no need to worry. My request is certainly within the scope of your ability, and I won't make things difficult for you. Otherwise, you can refuse." Qin Yu thought for a moment and nodded. "All right, I agree." The young man smiled. The Gold Noble family has a mysterious origin. In the rumors, they are related to the land of divinity and demons. This family is surnamed Ning, and they live in the Southern Empire, but they aren't located anywhere in the Southern Empire. Qin Yu's mind buzzed. Ning, their surname was Ning. Qin Yu immediately thought of Ning Ling. She had a formidable talent, a terrifying bloodline, and an incomparably mysterious background. Could she be someone from the Ning family? Qin Yu took a deep breath and suppressed his rising and falling thoughts. He continued to listen. The young man spoke a great deal, mixed with comments and praises of the Gold Noble family. But in summary, there was only one sentence. The Gold Noble family had a method to help Qin Yu break through his shackles and reach nascent soul. "How do I obtain it?" The young man smiled. "Before long, the Gold Noble family will be recruiting a new batch of servants in Ning City. Fellow Taoist Qin Yu, please think of a way to enter. The opportunity will soon appear." Qin Yu slowly said, "Can't you speak plainly?" The young man smiled. "There are some words that won't come true once spoken. But I won't lie to you. I asked fellow Taoist Qin Yu to believe me." Qin Yu's eyes were sharp. "I hope so." He stood up and pushed open the door to leave. As for the reward, he had already given it to him just now. The young man seemed to be in a very good mood. He wasn't in a hurry to leave and sat down to drink some tea. Soon, the door was pushed open once more and the docile maid walked in with a light expression. There was an indifference in her eyes, and there wasn't any trace of her previous soft and gentle temperament. "This servant is incompetent and failed to complete master's orders. I ask master to punish me." The young man smiled. Qin Yu is a cautious person. He is already suspicious of Heaven Seek Pavilion, so he naturally won't reveal any flaws. But I've already done what I should. All I need to do is wait. The maid furrowed her eyebrows. Is master really confident? The young man sighed. I've already had enough of these days. Even if there's only a 50% chance, I still have to try. He waved his hand, putting this matter behind him. How is the current situation? Reporting to master, the conflict between the demonic path and Immortal Eclipse Valley is becoming increasingly serious. There is no turning back. Pass down the order for everyone to withdraw. There is no need for us to interfere any longer. Leaving Heaven Seek Pavilion, Qin Yu shot into the skies. His eyes flashed and his thoughts raced. There was definitely a problem with Heaven Seek Pavilion in this matter. But right now, no matter what Heaven Seek Pavilion was planning, in order to break in a nascent soul, he could only raise his vigilance and wait. Ning City, Ning Family Whoosh. Chapter 239. Genius 1, second remember if you want to go. This is the web that provides you with wonderful novels to read. To the east of the Southern Empire, there was a vast and fertile plain that spanned thousands of miles. There was a great city that stood tall on the ground. Its name was Ning, and it maintained balance in all directions. Ning City lived up to its name. It had been peaceful for over 1,000 years and hadn't experienced any turmoil or destruction. Because of this, it became increasingly prosperous, and the wealth it had accumulated was an astronomical figure. This naturally attracted many covetous eyes. But no matter how the surrounding forces changed, Ning City remained calm and quiet, so calm that it left others in awe. Over time, even though no one knew how deep the waters were, no one dared to have any ideas about it. But as time passed, rumors began to spread. It was said that behind Ning City stood a family that lived in seclusion, and their strength was unfathomably formidable. This was just a rumor, and there was no concrete evidence. However, every 20 years, the Ning Mansion in Ning City would select a batch of outstanding young cultivators in the name of recruiting servants. Among them, the outstanding ones would gradually disappear in a short period of time. Speaking of which, this could be considered a somewhat horrifying matter. But from time to time, there would be 1 or 2 cultivators that were selected in the early years of the Ning Mansion. Their cultivations were unfathomably deep, and they wielded great authority within the Ning Mansion. Because of all of this, in addition to the speculations of all parties, there were gradually rumors that there was a great family that lived in seclusion in Ning City. Ning Mansion recruited servants once every 20 years. This was in order to find suitable people for this great family that lived in seclusion. Cultivators with a noble background certainly wouldn't consider becoming a servant for a better future. But to those cultivators that had no one to rely on, this was an opportunity. If they could grasp it, they might have some achievements in the future. Of course, there were risks. After all, no one knew where they would be brought to after being selected. What would they do? But taking 10,000 steps back, even if they weren't selected, entering Ning City's Ning Mansion was still a good choice for many people. Ning Mansion was the ruler of Ning City. As the 20-year period approached, Ning Mansion posted a notice to select servants. Ning City's bustling city became much livelier. Many cultivators rushed over from all over, hoping to find a lucky chance in this bustling city. Sueda's family had been living in Peace City for generations. They were the most experienced family in the city. Although they weren't considered as powerful, their status wasn't low either. Of course, a large part of this status was because Sueda's family had the qualifications to recommend servants to the Ning Mansion. And in these past years, many of them had been hired. Everyone wasn't mistaken. When the Ning Mansion recruited servants, they indeed needed to be recommended. Not just any random cat or dog could participate. If they wanted a clean background, they needed someone to vouch for them. If there weren't even these security measures, how could the secrets hidden within the Ning Mansion be preserved to this day? They would have long been made known to the entire world. Sueda was a name that had been passed down from more than 1,000 years ago to the present day. As long as one became the family head, their original name would immediately become invalid, and they would only be called Sueda. Therefore, this name was quite famous in Peace City. There were very few people who didn't know this name. Where did Master Su go today? Master Su, have you taken a liking to that nephew of mine? His character and foundation are unquestionable. Sueda, how many people are you going to recommend this time? That's right. The name Sueda wasn't something that just anyone had the qualifications to call out. This was called status and status. Thin, medium height, grizzled hair, this was the current Sueda. At this time, there was a light smile on his lips as he greeted everyone. Behind him followed a black-robed youth. His appearance couldn't be considered handsome, but his eyes were pitch black and bright. He was spirited, giving off a favorable impression. Sueda, where did you bring this young man back? On the second floor of the restaurant, near the window, the bald fatty had a surprised expression. He had heard that the Su family had already decided on a candidate list. Sueda smiled. This is a junior from a distant relative of mine. He has some talent in alchemy, so I sent him over to see if he can enter the eyes of the Ning Mansion. As he spoke, he twirled his beard, a smug look on his face. As expected, there was a loud gasp from the crowd, envy in their eyes. No wonder the Su family hadn't fallen for so many years. Their methods were truly brilliant. They could even find a young man with alchemy talent. Even in the Ning Mansion, alchemists were always respected. From this, it could be seen that Sueda had no chance of being selected. After exchanging some pleasantries and gaining enough attention, Sueda chuckled and left with the black-robed youth. When they arrived home, the Su family was thrown into chaos. After suddenly bringing back a complete stranger, the entire Su family felt a bit restless. However, with Sueda's endorsement, the situation soon calmed down. Their patriarch was smarter than a monkey, so he naturally wouldn't make any mistakes. The youth that entered the Su family with the name of a distant relative was quickly settled down. All that was left was to wait for the Ning Mansion to accept servants. Sitting in a simple and clean room, the black-robed youth revealed a helpless smile. With his current status, doing these things was a bit degrading. But in front of the great Tao of nascent soul, if he was degrading, then so be it. Come. Qin Yu followed behind in a daze. After entering the hidden door, there was a passage with rooms on both sides. The old man led the way to the second room on the left. What is your name? Qin Ning. What followed was a series of boring questions and answers. What Qin Yu said was the same as the information in the old man's hands. A moment later, after answering the last question, the old man smiled and suddenly drew backwards. At the same time, he shouted, "Men, capture him!" Qin Yu sat where he was, his eyes unfocused, as if he didn't know what was happening. And in the room, no one appeared. The old man looked over several times and then nodded. His face became tranquil once more, and he lowered his head to record the information into a jade slip. When the 5 people were sent back to their rooms and regained their composure, the hidden door had already closed, as if nothing had happened. A steward pushed open the door and brought them back. However, each of them had a jade card in their hands. After passing the examination, they had the qualifications to participate in the examination. As for whether or not they could be chosen, that would depend on their own abilities. You are called Qin Ning? Behind the table, an old man with messy hair and red eyes looked extremely sloppy. He looked over impatiently. He was in the middle of refining a pill and was suddenly interrupted to come out to manage the examination. Naturally, he wasn't in a good mood. Qin Yu bowed. Yes. All right, don't waste any more time. Here are the materials for a minor spirit pill. The pill furnace is over there. Go. After alchemist Zhang finished speaking, he closed his eyes and began to think about alchemy. Soon, his mind began to wander off. Just as he was thinking about the most interesting part and was about to find the root cause of his continuous failures, he was suddenly interrupted. Alchemist Zhang angrily opened his eyes. What are you doing? As for what was said just now, he didn't hear it at all. Qin Yu was a bit helpless. He repeated himself. Grandmaster, I've finished refining. Alchemist Zhang looked at the hourglass on the table. It wasn't even halfway done. A bit of surprise appeared in his eyes. He said, "Give me the pill." Qin Yu handed over a jade bottle with both hands. He opened it and poured it out. The pill was still warm and the heat hadn't yet dissipated. It was clear it had just been refined and the quality was actually quite good. He couldn't tell that this boy's alchemy foundation was actually quite good. What grade are you at? Reporting to Grandmaster, if I am lucky, I can refine a second-grade pill. The second-grade alchemist was already quite good. In a small sect, their status was comparable to an elder's, and they could live a carefree life. And most importantly, this boy was so young, and yet he was able to resist temptation and come to Ning Mansion. It was clear that he was ambitious. Alchemist Zhang was satisfied with this. Those of his generation who walked the path of alchemy needed to be brave and diligent, not letting down their own talent. You have passed. After today, you will follow me and work for me. His tone was a bit warmer. Qin Yu cupped his hands together. Then, the selection of servants ended. This wasn't anything to be surprised about. With Qin Yu's cultivation, if he couldn't even pass such a minor scene, he might as well find a block of tofu and kill himself. Thus, from today onwards, there was a new second-grade alchemist in Ning Mansion. Alchemists had a transcendent status, and their treatment was always a level higher. Qin Yu's cultivation as a second-grade alchemist was comparable to the Golden Core realm. He had his own courtyard, a generous monthly salary, and there was even a beautiful young girl who took care of his daily needs. Of course, if he wanted to do something else, that was fine too. No one knew what Alchemist Zhang's name was, but he was someone who loved alchemy and had an irritable temper. He didn't care about his appearance and often went to his alchemy room, not coming out for 10 days to half a month. His actions naturally caused those around him to complain, but they couldn't voice any complaints, otherwise they would be cursed at. Luckily, there was a young man named Qin Ning who had recently arrived. He was a very amiable person and had a second-grade alchemist cultivation at such a young age. His basic skills were incomparably solid, and he handled all sorts of alchemy matters with ease. Ever since he arrived, the pressure on everyone lessened a great deal. In particular, after Alchemist Zhang appointed Qin Yu as his assistant in alchemy, everyone's days became much more relaxed, and they were all overjoyed. Alchemist Zhang was very satisfied with Qin Yu. He even had thoughts of taking him in as a disciple. But after thinking about it for a moment, he gently sighed and suppressed this thought. Qin Yu was young, and yet he had a second-grade cultivation. There was no need to say anything about his talent, and his foundation in alchemy was extremely solid. Looking at his actions, he was calm and collected. For such an outstanding young man to come to Ning Mansion, it was clear he had great ambitions. A month later, Alchemist Zhang called out to Qin Yu, who had just finished his work and was about to leave. "I don't want to let you go, but I can't ruin your future. The mansion has already noticed you, so you should prepare yourself." Qin Yu bowed. "Thank you, Grandmaster, for the reminder." He turned and left, a smile on his face. The step of entering the Gold Noble family had been completed. Chapter 240. On the third day after he received news from Alchemist Zhang, Qin Yu gained a new friend in the Ning Mansion. Her name was July, and she was a young miss of the mansion. She said that her family had encountered some misfortune, so she was staying with the Ning family. The reason he met Chiyue was because the maid who took care of her had fallen ill, and she had come to his alchemy room to ask for medicine. Now that the maid's illness was under control, it could be seen that July was very grateful. She quickly became close to Qin Yu. She was a beautiful young woman with a soft and delicate temperament that easily won the favor of others. It wasn't long before the two of them felt as if they had been friends for many years. "I brewed the chicken soup myself. It's a pity that I don't have any ingredients on hand. Otherwise, the taste would be even better. Now, I can only use the fragrance of the chicken soup itself," Chiyue said with a smile. Qin Yu smiled. "It's delicious." Chiyue stood up. "I know you're very busy. Alchemist Zhang is really too much. It's fine if he's risking his life, but why did he have to drag you along with him? I can't even speak a few words with him." Perhaps she felt that the meaning revealed in her words was too straightforward. A faint blush appeared on her fair and delicate cheeks. She waved her hand and hurriedly left. Qin Yu finished the chicken soup in the porcelain cup and laid down the bowl. He thought for a moment and then revealed a helpless smile. July was too enthusiastic. Although it could be said that he had helped save the maid Xiaoqing, and there was a reason for them to be close, if something was wrong, it was still wrong. It was not good to lie to himself. "Sure enough, it's all fake that I'm too charming. Don't think too much about it. I'll just wash up and sleep." When the serving maid came in, Qin Yu composed himself. He stood up and said, "Wait a moment and wash yourself clean. Then send it back to Miss July." "Yes." Qin Yu arrived at the alchemy room. He greeted several people with a smile and then began to work. It was orderly, steady, and calm, no different from before. Time passed. From the time he had known Chiyue until now, almost a month had passed. The girl's attitude towards Chinyu had become much warmer and warmer. Of course, there was a reason for this. One day, when Chinyu returned to his residence, he encountered Chiyue being troubled by the Ning mansion steward. He spoke a few words, and with his status as a second-grade alchemist, the steward resentfully withdrew. Feeling the attachment in July's eyes, Chinyu smiled inwardly. It was about time. 2 days later, Ning mansion was burglarized. It seemed that something extremely valuable had been lost, and the mansion was constantly searched. When Chinyu was in the alchemy room, he was able to hear a few words. It was said that the Ning mansion had lost an extremely precious treasure that would be greatly beneficial to one's cultivation. It was night, deep in the darkness. The guest that came to Chinyu's courtyard was July. "Chin Ning, help me." Just this sentence alone was enough to move a person's heart. The girl's eyes were glistening with tears, and her expression was bitter and fearful. Chinyu let her in. "What's wrong?" July bit her lip. "I'm the one who stole it." Her face flushed red, and her expression became increasingly sorrowful. "But this was originally something that belonged to my family. I brought it into the mansion in the past, but it was forcefully taken away by the Ning family. I just want to take back what belongs to me." Chinyu frowned. "July, the mansion will not listen to your explanation." "I know. That is why I have to leave." July's eyes brightened. "Chin Ning, are you willing to take me with you? You should know how I feel. Take me away from here, and I'll give you both my family heirloom and myself." By the time she finished speaking, the girl's pretty face was already boiling hot. Chinyu couldn't help but acknowledge that July was extremely charming. Her "I'm in love with you" appearance made it hard for him to maintain his composure. But he already knew. He shook his head. "July, I'm sorry, but I cannot agree." July's complexion instantly paled. Her eyes were filled with disbelief, and her sorrow was enough to make one's heart tremble. Just as she was about to say something, Chinyu stepped forward and struck her neck. The girl fainted, all her words left in her stomach. Chinyu opened the door and woke up the maid. He had her tell the mansion that the thief had been found. The Ning mansion acted quickly. So, when July woke up, she found herself locked up in prison. The moment she opened her eyes, she was confused for a moment. Then, she furrowed her eyebrows and revealed a thoughtful expression. "July, I never thought you would be directly knocked unconscious. This is really—" Ning Yiran thought for a moment. He didn't know how to describe it, so he simply stopped here. July lightly said, "Young master, there is no need to feel awkward. I know the rules. Since I've been exposed, I should just leave the mansion." She paused for a moment, her voice heavy. "But I'm not willing." Ning Yiran frowned. "What do you mean?" "I want to try again. I asked young master to help me." Ning Yiran was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. Thus, Chinyu received news that the imprisoned July made a request to see him. Thinking about it, Chinyu didn't refuse. He went to the Ning mansion's dungeon. July leaned against a stone wall. Her thin and weak body was curled up like a wounded little beast. "Chin Ning, your heart is so hard." A faint sigh stirred the heart. Chinyu cupped his hands together. "I have wronged you in this matter. But, since I entered the Ning mansion, I am also a member of the mansion. It is impossible for me to harm the interests of the Ning mansion." July bitterly smiled. "But do you know what treasure I obtained? With it, there is no need for you to stay in the Ning mansion. I know that you are a proud person with great ambitions. This was your best chance, but you gave it up, and also me. Chin Ning, do you really not have even the slightest bit of friendship towards me in your heart?" Chinyu sighed. "There are things a gentleman can do and cannot do. I know that what July says is the truth, but I cannot do it. I can only apologize." At this point, the dungeon fell silent. July lowered her head. It was unknown what she was thinking. After a long time, she giggled and walked out from the corner of the wall. She straightened her back and said, "When did you realize it?" Chinyu frowned. "July, what is the meaning of this?" "Humph, there's no one else here, so why bother pretending? I have already done everything I can and spent an entire month. If you weren't already on guard, How could you possibly be so cruel to me? July's delicate and gentle air vanished, replaced with a bit more pride and arrogance. I have nothing to say about falling into your hands this time. But, for better or worse, you should at least let me know just where I gave myself away. Just consider, for the sake of the delicious food I sent you these past days. Chinyu's complexion paled, and his breathing became rapid. He had a look of anger, as if he had suddenly realized he had been played with. July, I never imagined that you were someone sent by the mansion to probe me. I was filled with pain and guilt before, but it turns out that I had eyes but failed to see and misjudged you. He flicked his sleeves and left. In the dungeon, July was stunned. She watched helplessly as he neatly walked away. After a long time, she gently sighed. Whether it was because Qi Ning was already on guard or because he truly didn't know anything, she was convinced. Facts spoke louder than words. Ning Yiran appeared from somewhere. July, do you have anything to say? July nodded. I asked young master to let me leave the mansion. Ning Yiran shook his head. Now, I will give you a second choice. Think about it, and then give me a reply. Qin Yu left the dungeon, his face dark and gloomy. He returned to his small courtyard and closed the door. He poured a cup of tea, took a sip, and then smashed the teacup to the ground. In the dark of night, the sound of the teacup shattering into pieces was grating to the ears. The maid that was carefully listening to the sound shrank back and tiptoed away. Qin Yu's lips curved up in a smile. Now that things had come this far, it was enough. The Ning family was indeed cautious. But Qin Yu wasn't that old. In order to maintain their current status, the Ning family was far more cautious than he imagined. Father, the test results prove that there is no problem with Qin Ning. In fact, he can even be called outstanding. Ning Yiran subconsciously frowned. But, I don't know why, but I feel that something is wrong. Ning Mingxuan's eyes flashed. Why? I don't know. Perhaps it's because July failed. Ning Yiran thought about it. Qi Ning had actually struck her unconscious, and he couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Perhaps it was because of this that he felt uneasy in his heart. Ning Mingxian was silent for a moment. Then, he slowly said, the list of names is given by the main family. We are only responsible for the test. Since there is no problem with Qi Ning, it wouldn't be good to cross him off. Ning Yiran was worried. But what if Qi Ning only has a foundation establishment cultivation? Even if he has second thoughts, what can he do if he enters the main family? Ning Mingxian lightly said. However, before he enters the main family, spread some rumors and see how he responds. Ning Yiran cupped his hands together. I understand. The next day, there were people in Ning Mansion who said that the new alchemy master, Qi Ning, had handed over Miss July for his own future. He had obtained the trust of the mansion's lords and was likely to be placed in an important position. Although it was reasonable to help the mansion catch a thief, the girl liked him and trusted him, yet he ended up in such a state. This didn't seem right. Thus, Qin Yu soon discovered that some of the eyes that fell on him became filled with contempt and indifference. In the alchemy room, the several people that were on good terms with him also became distant. For his own future, he was willing to sacrifice the woman that liked him. Who would be willing to be close to such a cold and callous person? Qin Yu maintained his composure. He sighed inwardly. July had been arranged by Ning Mansion, and now rumors were spreading everywhere. It was clear things weren't as simple as they seemed. Indeed, there were far too many intelligent people in this world, and they weren't easy to fool. But looking at the current situation, Ning Mansion should still have some misgivings about him. But there was no proof. They allowed the rumors to spread because they wanted to see his reaction and then make a judgment. Qin Yu thought for a moment and decided to stir up a bit of a ruckus. He was a young man after all. If he remained silent after being wronged, that would be abnormal. In 2 days, because of the rumors, he had 2 minor conflicts with others. He didn't know how, but alchemist Zhang found out. But he specifically called Qin Yu over. Be careful and don't stir up any trouble. These days might be able to change your life. Qin Yu gratefully nodded. He walked out the door with a smile. 5 days later, the steward of Ning Mansion brought Qin Yu away. Not long after, he saw the master of this mansion. Ning Mingxian lightly said, Qin Ning, My Ning family has a secret place that can help cultivators cultivate. You have been chosen to enter. You will leave tomorrow, so make some preparations." Qin Yu was overjoyed. After watching him leave, Ning Mingxian turned his head. "It looks like there aren't any problems." Ning Yiran nodded. In these past days, he had been paying attention to Qin Yu's performance. There hadn't been the slightest flaw. Chapter 241. Genius 1 Second Remember, providing you with wonderful novels to read. The next day, Qin Yu tidied himself up. Under the guidance of the Ning Mansion steward, he arrived at a common-looking side courtyard. Of course, with the Ning Mansion's status and influence, even if it was only a side courtyard, it was still luxurious. The steward spoke a few words and then cupped his hands together in farewell. After taking several steps away, his eyes revealed a bit of contempt. To sell out a woman in order to obtain qualifications, it was truly despicable. Of course, he wouldn't admit to the sour taste in his heart. The side courtyard had been temporarily sealed off, and there were no guards at the entrance. When Qin Yu entered, there were already over a dozen people in the small but exquisite courtyard. They stood beneath a tree filled with pink flowers, smiling and talking to each other. Whether it was a man or a woman, there was a bit of apprehension in their eyes, but there was even more pride and excitement. When Qin Yu appeared, the relaxed and lively atmosphere suddenly froze. Many eyes revealed indifference, criticism, and even a bit of ridicule. To sell out a woman, and a woman that liked him at that, it was hard to imagine that such a person could stand together with them. Of course, those that could appear here couldn't be said to be smart, but none of them were stupid. They swept their eyes over him several times before looking away. Then, they continued their previous topic, chatting as if Qin Yu's existence was nothing but air. Perhaps this sort of indifference was the greatest mockery. Many people felt a bit of comfort in their hearts. Qin Yu certainly knew just what was going on. He smiled inwardly and walked over to the corner where he stood. All he wanted was to enter the Gold Noble family. It didn't matter what these people thought of him. Glancing over, many people noticed Qin Yu's calm demeanor. After a moment of surprise, they sneered. The skin was really thick. The people from the Ning Mansion arrived. The one leading them was someone Qin Yu didn't recognize. He was a middle-aged man with a dignified and imposing aura. Ning Yiran and a group of 16 Ning family juniors followed behind him. "All of you wait here. We will leave in an hour." After speaking, the middle-aged man entered the main hall of the courtyard. Although there were no guards there, anyone with a bit of eyesight could feel a sharp and fierce aura emanating from the main hall. There was definitely a master standing guard here. "Greetings, young Master Ning. Young Master Yiran is coming with us? This is great. Ning Lu, I heard that he's only 15 years old this year. He's an incredible genius of the Ning Mansion and is highly regarded." It was normal for everyone to be pleasantly surprised. If these outstanding juniors of the Ning Mansion participated, it meant that their thoughts were likely true. At the very least, there wouldn't be any danger. The Ning Mansion juniors all had faint expressions. For them to appear here, they had already been informed of the greatest secret of the clan. After the shock, now was the time to be proud and complacent. Subconsciously, there was a hint of pride in his actions. "So, our Ning family is so awesome." Looking at the young cultivators selected from the mansion, although these people were not bad, they could not be compared to them. They were destined to only be supporting characters. Ning Yiran, on the other hand, had a gentle smile on his face as he nodded to the others. Suddenly, there was a sneer behind him. "Is this the Qin Ning who helped the mansion catch the thief? Alchemist Qin?" His words were filled with malice. Countless eyes instantly focused on him. After a short moment of surprise, they were immediately filled with joy. They didn't want to provoke Qin Yu, but the Ning family cultivators clearly had no scruples. His skin was torn off in front of everyone. Let's see if he still has the face to remain calm. Ning Yiran's eyes flashed. With his personality, he should have stopped the juniors of the clan, but as he thought about it, he chose to remain silent. In the eyes of others, this was a clear signal. The young master of the Ning Mansion also didn't like Qin Yu. Then what else was there to scruple about? Alchemist Qin caught the thief and was recognized by the mansion lords, allowing him to obtain the qualifications to participate today. What a good method. That's right. I fear there aren't many people who can be as decisive as Alchemist Qin. With Alchemist Qin's temperament, he will surely have great achievements in the future. Perhaps we will need to look after him in the future. Mockery and ridicule washed over them. These were all young people. While there might be some that were shrewd, there weren't many. Ning Yiran watched for a long time. Seeing no counterattack, Qin Yu's expression was light, as if he didn't hear these words at all. This was indeed the best way to deal with them. If he tried to argue, he would only be humiliated further. That's enough. Alchemist Qin is loyal to my Ning mansion, so it is only right that he be rewarded. Ning Yiran said. As the person who would control the future of the Ning mansion, the courtyard immediately quieted down. A middle-aged man walked out from the main hall. He lightly said, "Come in." Ning Yiran took a deep breath, a solemn expression on his face. Behind him were the Ning family juniors, and further behind them were the dozen or so young cultivators that had been chosen. Qin Yu tactfully fell behind, happy that no one was provoking him. On the floor of the main hall, the transmission array had been calibrated. Spiritual strength flowed through the array formation, emitting a low hum. "Follow me." The middle-aged man was the first to step in. The group of youths all revealed excited expressions as they entered the transmission array. A blinding light flashed and space twisted. The figures of the people in the array formation vanished. There was a feeling of space being torn apart all around them. Luckily, it disappeared soon and their field of vision brightened. What appeared in their line of sight was a beautiful valley. Sunlight sprinkled down from above without any obstruction, and the trees were lush and full of life. But what was strange was that besides the wind rustling the leaves, there was nothing but a deathly silence. Qin Yu subconsciously furrowed his eyebrows. This valley wasn't ordinary at all. His soul was incomparably powerful. He could faintly feel an invisible, binding strength shrouding this place. Without a doubt, this was definitely related to the Gold Noble family. Did they live here? Just as this thought appeared, he saw the middle-aged man leading the way step into the valley. Soon, a pool appeared in front of them. It was 70 to 80 feet wide and oval in shape. The water was clear, and there were aquatic plants growing at the bottom. There were no fish or shrimp. The middle-aged man took out an ancient jade from his chest and tossed it into the pool. Then, an astonishing scene occurred. The water in the pool seemed to boil, violently tumbling about. Then, a door in the water appeared. Through it, one could see what was on the other side. It was also a valley and the same pool. The two were completely the same, like a reflection. But there were no people standing near the pool on the other side, so it wasn't shadow. Besides Ning Yiran, everyone else revealed shocked expressions. Even Qin Yu's eyes brightened. Before this, he hadn't noticed anything strange about this pool at all. Was this the method of the Gold Noble family? It was truly fierce. The middle-aged man turned around. "Now go in." Ning Yiran respectfully bowed and was the first to step in. Qin Yu was still the last. As his feet landed on the ground, he looked back. Through the water door, he could see the middle-aged man standing upside down. He waved his hand, and the ancient jade flew into his hand. The water door vanished with it, and the pool in front of him became unremarkable. But everyone knew that there was a great secret hidden in this pool. Shwa, shwa. Two figures flew over, landing in front of the crowd. They were both young, but their auras left one startled. Golden core perfection. One more step, and they could reach nascent soul. Ning Yiran hurriedly bowed. Outer branch Ning Mansion's Ning Yiran greets two clan brothers. In the outside world, he was a high and lofty young master of the Ning family. He was destined to inherit great power and status. But in the main clan, he was only a relatively outstanding outer branch junior disciple. His father had solemnly warned him that he had to be respectful and couldn't be arrogant in his heart. Behind him, the young cultivators who didn't know the truth all revealed looks of ecstasy. It was true, the rumors were true. Across from them, the young cultivator on the left swept his eyes around and frowned. In these past years, The people you send over are getting worse and worse. Ning Yiran respectfully said, the outer branch has failed in handling matters. I am willing to accept punishment. The young cultivator waved his hand. This is the matter of the outer branch, elder. It isn't my place to speak. Let's go. We have other matters to attend to. He turned and walked away. As for the other person, he didn't speak from start to finish. Ning Yiran relaxed a little. The other party didn't have any intention of making things difficult for him. But as he thought of his words, he couldn't help but bitterly smile. It wasn't that the people chosen by the Ning mansion weren't good enough, but that geniuses could be seen everywhere in the main family. Compared to them, they were indeed much worse. This was the truth. There was no way to argue with it. Qin Yu lowered his head, as if in awe and fear. His lowered eyes hid the shock in them. He swept his gaze over the ground. The endless plains, the rolling mountain ranges, the roaring rivers, everything was the same. But everything was no longer the same. Every breath he took was pure heaven and earth spiritual strength. It was several times richer than in a mortal eclipse valley. Moreover, what surprised him even more was the fluctuations coming from the little blue lamp. These fluctuations were transmitted into the great Tao base. Then, deep in Qin Yu's mind, an image appeared. It was a dot of light floating in the darkness. Thus, he knew that this dot of light was where he was right now. No wonder that young man from Heavenseek Pavilion had said that the gold noble family lived in the Southern Empire, but they weren't located anywhere in the Southern Empire, because this place was an independent spatial fragment. This surpassed Qin Yu's understanding. He never imagined that such a place existed in this world, and what was even more astonishing was that the gold noble family could live here. It was no wonder that Heavenseek Pavilion would call them one of the strongest influences. Just what he saw was enough to convince him. Qin Yu didn't dare to recklessly look around, but based on what he saw, he could guess that this spatial fragment was at least a fifth the size of the Southern Empire. This area was simply astonishing. Soon, signs of people began to appear. There were many villages and towns on the ground, but their group didn't stop until a mountain city appeared in front of them. The reason it was called this was because this city was completely built around the mountain. The buildings at the bottom were densely packed, and the higher they went, the more sparse they became. The residences were larger, more luxurious, and more exquisite. Many of them were hidden in the fog, giving off the feeling of immortals living here. When they were still some distance from the mountain city, the two young men leading the way landed. They were still the ones who spoke before. They pointed at a large stone in front of them and said, "This is the mountain overlook stone. All disciples below the Golden Core realm are forbidden from flying. Remember this well. Otherwise, if you provoke any trouble in the future, you will have to bear it yourself." As the leader of the group, Ning Yiran cupped his hands together. "Thank you for the advice, clan brother." After passing the mountain overlook stone, the group didn't slow down. They soon arrived at the base of the mountain where there were many buildings. After knocking on a courtyard door, the young man who spoke took a step back. "Elder, Ning Feng has come to report." After a moment, the courtyard door opened from within. An old man with a white face and puffy eye bags walked out, his body weak and listless. But everyone was startled, and awe filled their eyes. Nascent Seoul. In the Southern Empire and Northern Dynasty, these were peak powerhouses. But here, they only lived in simple courtyards, as if they weren't anything at all. This sort of silent impact was even more direct and shocking. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.